Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Tracie Hawlett and J.B. Beasley. J.B. Beasley, born on July 31, 1981, in Troy, Alabama, to parents Cheryl and Hilton Lanier Beasley. After her parents' separation, Beasley moved to Dothan with her mother in 1984. She was deeply loved by her mother and stepfather, Joey Begun, whom her mother married a few years later. Beasley grew up in a comfortable home in Dothan, Alabama, with her 4 sisters. She developed into a sociable young woman with a wide range of interests, including cheerleading, dance, piano, and swimming. She also worked as a model, along with her sisters, for several agencies. Despite her many pursuits, she valued time spent with friends and family. In high school, Beasley befriended Tracie Hawlett, a fellow cheerleader. They quickly became inseparable. Tracie Hawlett was born on March 3, 1982, to Carolyn and Robert Hawlett. Her father, a member of the Dothan Police Department, tragically passed away when Tracie was just 5 years old. Her mother, Carolyn, later remarried a man named Mike Roberts, who helped raise Tracie Hawlett alongside her mother. Tracie Hawlett was a shy but selfless person who always put others before herself. She was particularly protective of her 2 younger brothers and took her responsibilities as an older sister seriously. Like Beasley, Tracie Hawlett attended Northview High School, earning good grades and participating as a cheerleader. As Beasley and Tracie Hawlett were transitioning into adulthood, they were unaware of the tragic events that would soon shatter their hopes and dreams. On the evening of July 31, 1999, around 10:05 p.m., they friends left Dothan in J.B. Beasley's black 1993 Mazda 929, heading to a birthday party in Headland, just a few miles north. However, their unfamiliarity with the roads soon led them into difficulty. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett started their trip but took a wrong turn shortly after leaving their hometown, becoming lost. At around 10:30 p.m., they stopped at a BP gas station in Headland, near the intersection of routes 173 and 431, to get directions. From the gas station's payphone, they called their friends to get clearer directions to their party destination. However, after continuing their trip, they found themselves in Ozark, Alabama, approximately 24 miles northwest of Headland, rather than their desired location. At 11:30 p.m., they realized they were still lost and pulled over at the Big Little store to get their bearings. Although the store was closed, Tracie Hawlett used the payphone to call her mother, explaining that they had gotten lost and were now in Ozark. She updated her mother on their plans to return home rather than continue their search for the party. A woman named Marilyn Merrick and her daughters pulled into a gas station to buy a soda. Tracie Hawlett and Beasley approached them, asking for directions to Dothan. Marilyn did her best to explain the route, and they seemed to grasp it. She noticed that they appeared to be well-mannered and were driving a clean and tidy car. As Marilyn watched, they followed her directions, pulling out of the parking lot and turning right. On August 1, 1999, Tracie Hawlett's mother filed a missing person report with the police around 8 a.m. Investigators quickly began searching for Tracie Hawlett and her friend, Beasley, who had not been seen since the previous night. Their first lead came when police discovered Beasley's car parked on Herring Avenue in Ozark. The vehicle showed signs of recent use, with an almost empty gas tank despite being filled the day before. The car was also dirty and had a partially rolled down driver's side window, yet the doors were locked with no signs of forced entry. Inside, police found Beasley's driver's license on the dashboard, along with 8 purses and cash, which suggested that the disappearance was not a result of a typical theft or robbery. The investigation into She's initially focused on finding Beasley's car keys, as they were the only reported missing item. However, there was no sign of either Tracie Hawlett or Beasley. A suspicious palm print on the locked trunk of Beasley's car heightened the police's concerns that something was terribly wrong. Although they suspected the trunk might hold important clues, they couldn't access it without the keys. It took 6 hours for the police to realize that the trunk could be opened from the inside using a latch, eliminating the need for the car key or a locksmith. Upon opening the trunk, the officers made a disturbing discovery. The lifeless bodies of the girls were found inside. Both victims were fully dressed, but their pants were soiled below the waist. Each girl had a single gunshot wound to the head, with Tracie Hawlett shot in the temple and Beasley in the right cheek. Tracie Hawlett had suffered injuries consistent with a violent struggle, including a 9mm shell casing lodged on her leg, scratches on her arm, and thornbriars tangled in her jeans. Despite the gruesome nature of the crime, investigators believed that they were likely killed while inside the trunk of the car and that their deaths were not the result of a random attack, but rather an intentional act. As the families of the victims were notified of the tragic discovery, the authorities formally launched a homicide investigation. Initially, detectives considered robbery as a possible motive, but this theory was quickly dismissed when they found that the victims' personal belongings, including purses, jewelry, money, and credit cards, were still inside the car. Autopsies revealed that they had no alcohol or drugs in their system, and there was no evidence of sexual assault. This led investigators to rule out the possibility that the crime was motivated by sex. However, a subsequent report from the State Crime Lab, issued more than 2 months later, found traces of unknown semen on Tracie Hawlett's clothing and skin. The palm print found on the trunk lid remained unidentified, with no matches in the database and no suspect to compare it to. As a result, authorities had limited leads to pursue. Despite the widespread attention the double murder of the teenagers received, investigators were no closer to identifying a suspect. A month after the discovery of Beasley and Tracie Hawlett's bodies, a surprising breakthrough occurred. Johnny William Barentine, a 28-year-old Ozark resident, visited the Ozark Police Department on September 1st and shared a remarkable account. He claimed to have witnessed the double murder, stating that he had seen the incident on the same night as the crimes, around the time Tracie Hawlett made a call from the Big Little Store's payphone. According to Barentine, he had been out buying milk for his 2-year-old son when he stumbled upon the horrific event. He returned home at 1 a.m., visibly upset, and told his wife that he had been in a collision with a black truck near Herring Road. After sharing this incident with friends in the days that followed Tracie Hawlett and Beasley's murder, they encouraged him to report it to the police. They suggested that this information might be connected to the murders and could help the police solve the case, ultimately leading to the reward. During a 4-hour interview with Ozark police, Barentine's account of the events surrounding the killings changed 6 times. Initially, he told police that on the night of the murders, he saw a black truck speeding away from the area where the bodies were found. However, as the interview progressed, his story continued to evolve and change. Eventually, Barentine claimed that he had given a ride to a tattooed man he didn't know, and they drove past the Big Little Store together. He then testified that the man got into the car with 2 girls, whom he identified as Tracie Hawlett and Beasley. According to Barentine, the man forced they out of the car on Herring Avenue. A confrontation took place between the man and they as they tried to escape. After putting they in the trunk, Barentine reported seeing something in the man's hands just before hearing 2 gunshots. The man then returned to the car, and Barentine drove him away from the scene before heading home. In a different account, Barentine confessed to investigators that he knew the man he had given a ride to and identified him as his neighbor. Notably, Barentine lived less than a mile from where the police found the victims' bodies. Johnny Barentine was named the prime suspect in the murders of Beasley and Tracie Hawlett, but his story raised several red flags. He failed to mention any sexual activity that would explain the semen found on Beasley's clothing and body. Additionally, The neighbor he implicated had a solid alibi for the time of the crime. Barentine's appearance in his mugshot also seemed suspicious, as he looked startled and disheveled, as if he had just been awoken from a deep sleep. Despite these inconsistencies, police initially believed they had the right person. However, Barentine soon confessed that he had fabricated his entire story to collect the reward money. Surprisingly, at the preliminary hearing on September 21, Alabama Bureau of Investigation agent Charles Huggins testified that Barentine was able to accurately describe her clothing and other details consistent with the crime scene, which suggested that he may have had some knowledge of the events. After his arrest, Barentine was held in the Dale County Jail in Ozark without the possibility of bail. At a bond hearing on October 18, Barentine claimed he was not involved in the killings. He told the judge that he had not picked up a tattooed man and had not witnessed anything on the night of the murders. According to Barentine, he had gone to the BP station around 11 p.m. to buy milk for his child and later fabricated a story to collect the reward money. The judge denied Barentine's request for bond, and he returned to jail. Despite the challenges, Barentine's family continued to support him. They gave interviews to the media, stating that he was innocent and incapable of harming anyone. Barentine's lawyer, Bill Kimmons, also maintained his client's innocence, stating that the prolonged interrogation had taken a toll on him, causing him to become entangled in his own web of deceit. During police questioning, Barentine was not informed that he was free to leave or use the bathroom at any time. His defense team highlighted that he had limited education, having only completed the 7th grade and part of the 8th grade, and was in special education classes, which suggested he lacked the capacity to plan a complex crime. He was eventually released from jail on December 17, 1999, when DNA evidence revealed that his DNA did not match the semen found on the victim's body and clothing. In January 2000, a grand jury in Dale County declined to indict Barentine, effectively clearing him as a suspect in the double murder. The investigation suffered a setback after Barentine's clearance, and the methods used by investigators were criticized. Questions arose about the Ozark Police Department's ability to handle the case. Despite this, the police still had several potential suspects under consideration. A Michigan man was considered a key suspect due to his proximity to the scene and suspicious behavior. He was in the area on the night of the murders and attended a party near where Beasley's car was found. Within days, he left town, raising suspicions. Investigators made 3 trips to Michigan to interview him, but he was unable to provide a solid alibi for hours on the night of the murder. Police were initially interested in 2 key leads, a person of interest whose DNA didn't match the crime scene, and a driver of a small white pickup truck captured on surveillance footage. The video showed the truck at the gas pumps at the same time the victims, Beasley and Tracie Hawlett, were nearby at the payphone. However, no record of a gas purchase existed, and the video was of poor quality, making it impossible to clearly identify the driver or determine if anyone got out of the truck. The police released a photo of the truck a month later, asking for the public's help in identifying the driver. Unfortunately, no one came forward with any information, and the lead eventually disappeared. The investigation's last lead was a man from Mississippi who had been arrested in Jones County on an outstanding warrant for possessing drug paraphernalia. He had been visiting relatives in Ozark, but departed 2 days after the murders. Investigators wanted to question him, but ultimately, he provided no significant information. Due to lack of evidence, they were forced to release him. In March 2000, a woman came forward, claiming she heard screams and 2 gunshots near Highway 123 South, just inside the city limits, on the night of the murders. She admitted she had been scared to report it earlier. Police searched the area based on her description and found a 9mm bullet, the same type used to kill they. However, the bullet's brand did not match the brand of the bullet shell casing found on Tracie's body. The unspent bullet found no useful markings for forensic comparison to other evidence, ruling out another potential lead in the case. Despite this and other dead ends over the years, investigators remained hopeful for a DNA match. As the families of Beasley and Tracie Hawlett tried to move on with their lives, the case eventually went cold. Years later, new information rekindled the investigation. In 2015, a bombshell accusation shook the case. Rena, an auxiliary police officer with the Ozark Police Department, came forward and publicly accused a fellow officer of murdering Beasley and Tracie Hawlett and implicated others in a cover-up. Rena made several disturbing allegations regarding the Ozark Police Department. She claimed that on July 31, 1999, a police officer stopped Beasley and demanded to know the location of cassette tapes containing incriminating conversations about the police department's involvement in cocaine trafficking. According to Rena, this confrontation led to the tragic murder of two innocent teenagers. Rena further alleged that she was threatened by multiple law enforcement officials who knew the identity of the murderer but helped cover up the crime by destroying evidence. Specifically, Rena accused three officers, Gary Butch Whittington, Rex Tipton, and Eddie Henderson, of harassing and intimidating her. She also implicated the former police chief, Tony Spivey, who led the original investigation, in the cover-up. However, Rena declined to reveal the name of the officer she believed was directly responsible for the murders. American journalist John B. Carroll wrote that the officer likely assumed they girls planned to use the tapes as evidence in a court case set for August 2, 1999, just over a day after their murders. Carroll also reported that Rena was brutally beaten with a baseball bat after coming forward, which prevented her from revealing the actual killer. Law enforcement officials accused by Rena denied any involvement in the murders of Beasley and Tracie Hawlett. Due to a lack of physical evidence, none of the officials were ever formally named as suspects in the case. Despite this, online allegations against them spread quickly on true crime websites and social media. As a result, Keith Coffin, Rex Tipton, Tony Spivey, Eddie Henderson, and Gary Butch Whittington from the Ozark, Alabama Police Department sued Rena Crum, John B. Carroll for defamation in 2016. The case was later dismissed in 2018. In May 2016, Rena Crum was convicted of harassing Beasley's sister over several years and received a suspended sentence and a $250 fine. Despite an extensive investigation that spanned 2 decades, including numerous interviews and DNA samples, authorities were unable to identify a suspect. It wasn't until 2019 that advances in DNA technology finally led to a breakthrough. In March 2019, investigators sent the DNA evidence found on Beasley's body in clothes to a specialized lab in Virginia called Parabon Nano. The lab used public genealogy databases to analyze the DNA and found a match, leading them to identify a suspect named Coley McCraney. McCraney, 45, was not previously a suspect in the 1999 murders of Beasley and Tracie Hawlett, but DNA evidence now implicated him in the crime. McCraney was born in Alabama and graduated from Carroll High School in Ozark in 1992. During his time in high school, he was an athlete and also served as the president of the library club. After graduation, he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force and served from 1993 to 1997. In 1992, McCraney was married, but they separated 2 years later. They eventually divorced. His ex-wife filed a complaint with the Air Force in 1994, alleging that McCraney had assaulted her. McCraney later remarried in 2001 and had children with his second wife. In 1998, he was found to have failed to pay child support, but otherwise, he had no significant criminal record over the past 20 years. McCraney worked as a truck driver throughout his career, employed by several Alabama-based trucking companies over the years. More recently, he co-founded a church and worked as a bishop. At the time of the 1999 murders, Coley McCraney was 26 years old and living in Ozark, just 1 mile from where the bodies of Beasley and Tracie Hawlett were found. Nearly 20 years later, on March 15, 2019, McCraney was arrested in Daleville, Alabama, following a traffic stop. During his subsequent interview with police, McCraney claimed to not know the victims. However, the investigators did not reveal any motive for the murders. The news of McCraney's arrest sent shockwaves through the Ozark community, including its police chief, Marlon Walker, who had attended school with McCraney. As the case seemed to be finally unraveling, a new development emerged. Rena Crum, a 53-year-old woman who had previously accused the Ozark Police Department of covering up the murder, withdrew her allegations during an August 2022 hearing. McCraney, 49, is currently in Dale County Jail awaiting trial on 5 counts of capital murder for the shooting deaths of Beasley and Tracie Hawlett. His bond was denied, and his trial is scheduled for April 17, 2023. The families of the victims expressed relief that the alleged killer has been apprehended, but they still face the difficult process of reliving painful memories during the trial. McCraney was ultimately found guilty of the murder and rape of Beasley and the murder of Hawlett. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Paige Bergfeld. After high school, Paige attended the University of Florida's nursing school, where she met Howard Bigler. They started dating after realizing their mutual feelings for each other. After graduating with a nursing degree, Paige returned to Colorado to live with her family. In 1995, she and Howard got married. At first, they seemed like a happy couple, sharing many common interests and views. However, they had a significant disagreement that eventually led to their divorce. Paige wanted to have a child and start a family, but Howard didn't share her desire. This issue caused frequent arguments and discussions, but they couldn't find a compromise. In 1997, they decided to divorce. Despite this, they remained friends due to their strong connection. Paige later married Rob Dixon, but that marriage also ended in divorce. After her second divorce, Paige reconnected with Howard. He claimed to be one of the last people to see her alive. On the 28th, Howard and Paige, who were previously married, met in Eagle County, Colorado, to attend to personal matters. They spent Thursday together, after which they returned to their separate homes. Following their meeting, they continued to stay in touch through phone calls. Later, when Paige went missing, Howard quickly reached out to emergency services to report his concerns. During the call, he expressed his deep worry and belief that something terrible might have happened to her. Howard mentioned that Paige was a devoted mother who would never abandon her children without a valid reason. A recording of the call confirmed this, and cell tower data verified that Howard was in the Denver, Colorado area on the day Paige disappeared, which is a significant distance from where she was last seen. This evidence led the police to rule Howard out as a suspect. The investigation then focused on Paige's relationship with her second husband, Rob Dixon, and uncovered several suspicious incidents that required further investigation. Paige had previously reported her husband Rob to the police twice for harassment during their marriage. Before marrying Rob, Paige worked at a strip club in Denver, where she met him. Rob came from a wealthy family and had inherited a significant fortune. The two fell in love and got married in 1998. The couple settled in a luxurious home in Colorado, where Paige realized her dream of becoming a mother. Within a few years, they had 3 children who became the center of Paige's life. The early years of their marriage seemed happy, with the couple enjoying a luxurious lifestyle. However, things took a turn for the worse due to Rob's financial difficulties. Rob's family businesses faced severe issues, leading to a significant decline in their economic situation. As a result, Rob was forced to file for bankruptcy, which triggered a deep family crisis. By 2004, tensions had escalated to the point where Paige called emergency services twice. The first time, she reported that Rob had threatened to kill her and their children, but when the police arrived, they claimed to have resolved their issues. A year later, Paige reported Rob for assaulting her while she was holding their youngest child. Rob was arrested and charged with third-degree assault. He eventually pleaded guilty to 1 count of molestation, but the trial was dismissed and he avoided jail time. The couple's relationship continued to deteriorate, leading them to separate. Rob then moved to Pennsylvania. During the investigation into Paige's disappearance, Rob was interviewed to establish his alibi for that day. He claimed to have been at home and could not have harmed her. The investigators could not find any evidence to implicate Rob in her disappearance. In fact, Rob actively participated in the search for Paige. The investigating officers left no stone unturned in their effort to find clues and solve the mystery of the missing mother. The investigation into Paige's disappearance began with a thorough examination of her car. It was hoped that evidence in the car could help locate her or provide clues about what had happened. Sergeant Weiler of the County Sheriff's Department noted that arson is often used to destroy evidence, but in this case, the examination of the vehicle yielded valuable information. The driver's seat was found to be pushed back as far as it would go, indicating that the last person to drive the car was a tall individual, inconsistent with Paige's short stature. The trunk of the car contained Paige's notebook, with pages torn out from June 26 to June 29. As time passed, the search for Paige became increasingly urgent. A break in the case came when a driver stopped on a highway southeast of town to fix a flat tire and discovered a checkbook lying nearby. He reported it to the authorities, who then searched the area and found additional items belonging to Paige, including medical records and insurance cards. Sergeant Weiler's investigation into Paige Bergfeld's disappearance took a dramatic turn when he found a business card on the road, leading him to a shocking discovery. Paige was secretly working as an escort under the alias Carrie. This revelation completely upended the investigation, as it revealed a side of Paige's life that her loved ones knew nothing about. Previously, it was believed that Paige was a devoted mother who worked hard to provide for her children after her divorce. She had started her own children's clothing business, taught dance lessons, and sold kitchen supplies. Despite her busy schedule, she always made time for her children and was actively involved in their school activities. However, the discovery of the secret phone Paige used for her escort work revealed a completely different picture. This phone became a crucial piece of evidence, leading police to unravel a complex mystery that was far more sinister than anyone had initially suspected. The investigation into Paige's disappearance led to more questions than answers. What prompted a responsible mother and successful businesswoman to lead a secret life? And how was this double life connected to her vanishing? These questions took center stage in the investigation, adding a new layer of mystery. To get to the bottom of things, detectives analyzed Paige's cell phone, found in her car, and examined her contacts and calls from the hours leading up to her disappearance. The last call made from her phone was on June 28th around 9 p.m. This analysis led investigators to identify 7 suspects, one of whom was Lester Ralph Jones. Jones's criminal record raised red flags, particularly his history of violence against women and a previous kidnapping conviction that earned him a 5-year prison sentence. However, it wasn't the only concerning aspect. Jones's white car matched the description of the vehicle seen by Carol, Paige's friend. Carol shared a crucial detail with detectives. Paige had once approached her car, only to find a white car blocking her driveway. Enraged, Paige got behind the wheel to turn around, but the cars collided. The unknown driver quickly fled the scene. Investigators suspected that Lester might have been obsessed with Paige and was stalking her after discovering that he had tried to book an appointment with her for intimate services on the day before she vanished. When questioned, Lester denied any involvement in her disappearance and provided fingerprints and DNA samples. However, A search of his home turned up several incriminating items, including a prepaid phone, wigs, Viagra, a sheet with an escort service's phone number, and women's lingerie in various sizes. The prepaid phone caught the investigators' attention due to suspicious calls made to Page's phone on the day she disappeared. Lester initially denied owning a second phone, which proved to be a lie. Using the phone's packaging found at his home, police traced the purchase to a supermarket on North Avenue. The store's security footage showed Lester buying the phone, which he refused to acknowledge when confronted with the evidence. Lester Jones became the main suspect in Page's disappearance, but the police couldn't find enough concrete evidence to charge him. They continued to investigate and search for Page's body, hoping to find proof of his guilt. However, the case stalled for several years, leaving Page's family and loved ones in a state of unbearable grief. As time passed, the search seemed increasingly futile, and the hope of finding Page alive began to fade. In 2012, a hiker stumbled upon human remains in a ravine in Delta County, surprisingly close to where Page's personal belongings had been found 5 years prior. Investigators were nearly certain the body was that of a young mother, and DNA testing confirmed it was indeed Page. Unfortunately, her story ended in tragedy. The condition of the body made it impossible to determine the exact cause of death, but it was clear she had suffered a brutal beating with multiple broken bones, particularly in her face. It was concluded that her injuries ultimately led to her death. The discovery of Page's body added a horrific layer to the story. It's believed that her body was buried, but years of soil erosion eventually brought it to the surface, which may explain why it wasn't found sooner. The discovery led to a breakthrough in Lester Ralph Jones's case, which had stalled for years. In November 2014, he was charged with kidnapping, first-degree murder, and second-degree murder. The trial finally began in July 2016 and lasted 22 days. Prosecutors claimed that Lester's frustration over being unable to see Page, combined with his history of violence against women, motivated the crime. The prosecution's key witness, Lester's ex-wife Lisa, testified about his violent past. She described how Lester kidnapped and threatened to kill her at gunpoint in the late 1990s after she ended their relationship. On one occasion, he attacked her and her partner, shooting the latter in the head. A month later, Lester made another threat, warning her that she would be thrown into a lake. Lisa managed to escape and contacted the police, leading to Lester's arrest on charges of kidnapping and assault. In contrast, Lester's defense attorneys argued that the police had wrongly accused an innocent man and suggested that other clients of Page's may have had motives for the crime. However, they failed to provide convincing evidence linking anyone else to the murder. Lester's current wife testified, stating that although her husband used an escort service, her faith prevented her from leaving him. Nevertheless, she could not provide an alibi for him and identified him in a supermarket surveillance video where he bought a disposable phone. Lester's first trial ended in a mistrial on September 9, 2016, when the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict. However, the district attorney was convinced of Lester's guilt and continued to investigate and re-examine the evidence. After several weeks, on November 21, 2016, the jury finally reached a verdict, finding Lester guilty of all charges related to Page's death. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Lester's defense team appealed the sentence, but an appeals court panel upheld the conviction and sentence in June 2022. Page's funeral was held on April 28, 2012. Her obituary remembered her as a beautiful and radiant woman with a smile that lit up the room. Her tragic death has had a lasting impact on her family and friends, leaving her 3 children without their loving mother and support. The tragic case of Page captured the nation's attention and spanned many years, but through the unwavering dedication of law enforcement relatives, justice was finally served. Lester Ralph Jones was ultimately convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, ensuring he can no longer harm innocent people. Paige's courageous story stands as a powerful reminder of the significance of persisting in the pursuit of justice, no matter how long and arduous the journey may be. Her memory will forever be cherished by those who knew and loved her. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jodi Sanderholm. Jodi Leanne Sanderholm was born on September 26, 1987, in Arkansas City to parents Brian and Cindy Sanderholm. As the third of three children, she had an older brother named Jason and an older sister named Jennifer. From an early age, Jodi had a passion for dance, which played a significant role in her life. However, she also prioritized her education and excelled in her studies. Jodi's academic achievements were impressive, earning her one of 4 valedictorian spots in her graduating class. During her high school years, she was an active member of the National Honor Society, received recognition as a Kansas State Scholar, and was awarded the Outstanding Physics Student of the Year award. Additionally, she was captain of the Ark City High School dance team for 2 years and an instructor for both Ark City Dance and the Universal Dance Association. After graduating, Jodi attended Cowley College, where she studied pre-pharmacy and was part of the Cowley Tigerette dance line. On the morning of January 5, 2007, Jodi drove to college for a dance rehearsal that was scheduled to end at 10:45 a.m. After the rehearsal, she planned to return home. However, when her mother, Cindy, called her cell phone multiple times, Jodi didn't answer, which was unusual for her. Being a responsible and communicative person, Jodi always kept in touch with her family, and her mother's repeated calls went unanswered, leaving her with a sense of unease. Cindy left work early to check on Jodi, who should have returned from dance rehearsal. But when Cindy arrived home, she noticed Jodi's car was missing, which only added to her anxiety. Entering the house, Cindy realized Jodi was not there. Her dance uniform, which she usually washed after rehearsal, was nowhere to be found. The shower stall was dry, suggesting Jodi hadn't showered after dance class. Cindy soon discovered that Jodi had not contacted her father or sister Jennifer either. Jodi had a noon appointment, but she didn't show up. Cindy and Brian began calling Jodi's friends, hoping someone had seen her. But none of them had since the morning rehearsal ended. The dance team was scheduled to perform at a basketball game that evening, and Jodi, as the choreographer, wouldn't have missed it voluntarily. However, she didn't show up. By 6 p.m., Cindy and Brian were still unable to locate Jodi, so they contacted the police and reported her missing. The sheriff's office quickly created flyers with Jodi's description and began investigating her last known whereabouts, issuing an APB on her vehicle. On January 6th, Jodi's best friend, Lori Leglider, whom she had known since high school and had danced with, provided crucial information to the police. The two friends had also attended Cowley College together, where they studied dance. Lori told the police that she had left her job at Sirloin Stockade in Arkansas City around 10 p.m. on Tuesday, January 2nd, and had noticed a light blue car driving by the restaurant multiple times as she departed. Lori noticed a car following her on her way home, which made her feel uneasy. To test her suspicion, she turned onto different streets, but the car behind her kept following. Frightened, she drove to the local police station and parked, hoping the stalker would leave her alone. When she didn't see the car anymore, she drove home. However, she soon saw the car again, so she returned to the police station parking lot and waited in her car for a while before driving home. Lori initially thought it was a prank, but she didn't report the incident to the police. On January 5th, Lori and her friend Jodi arrived at the college for a dance team rehearsal. Lori recognized the same light blue car that had been following her, and she saw the driver, 23-year-old Justin Thurber, who was a local resident. Although Lori didn't know Justin personally, she had seen him with his older brother and friends before. After practice, Lori and Jodi planned to meet up later, but Jodi never showed up. It was then revealed that several dance team members had also seen Justin lurking around the college campus that week. In the initial stages of the investigation into Jody's disappearance, police searched the city thoroughly but couldn't find her car within the first 24 hours. The city of Arkansas is surrounded by open fields and wooded areas, making it a challenging task. To aid their search, authorities brought in a fixed-wing aircraft to scour the region from above. They hoped to spot Jody's car, which was larger and easier to detect than a person. The police investigation revealed that the last signal from Jody's cell phone was received from a tower near the Kaw Wildlife Area, a vast wooded region along the Arkansas River. At this point, only one suspect had emerged, Justin Eugene Justin, identified by Lori Legliner and other members of the dance group. Notably, Justin was already familiar to the police due to a prior incident in 2004 when he was charged with illegal possession of banned substances despite his young age. Justin was sentenced but didn't serve time in prison. Instead, he was released. However, just 3 months later, he was arrested again for stealing in Probate Nation, violating his probation. In October 2005, he was charged with disorderly conduct. 3 months after that, he was arrested for petty theft and found with illegal drugs. Then, on December 31, 2006, just 6 days before Jody's disappearance, Justin was arrested for theft once more. After posting a $3,000 bail, Justin was freed on New Year's Eve. The very next day, January 1st, he pretended to be a police officer, causing a public disturbance. When the real police arrived, Justin claimed to have chest pain and was taken to the hospital rather than the police station. It's unclear why he wasn't arrested after being discharged from the hospital, and it's also unclear how he managed to avoid consequences for his actions. A family tie to Cowley County Police might have influenced events. On January 6th, an officer spotted Justin's Cadillac at his parents' house and initiated a conversation. Justin's father invited the officer in. When questioned about his previous day's whereabouts, Justin said he drove to Winfield, 13 miles outside Arkansas City that morning. In Winfield, Justin met up with a friend and 2 acquaintances of his friend, whom he didn't know well. The 4 of them then drove around the countryside in one of the acquaintances' cars until it became stuck on a dirt road near Cedar Vale. Justin claimed that he proceeded to walk towards Arkansas City, a 30-mile journey from Cedar Vale. After 6 hours of walking, he grew tired and called his father to come pick him up. Justin's father backed his son's story, saying he'd picked him up near Cali State Fishing Lake, where Justin was wet and dirty. The officer found the story unconvincing, but lacked evidence to charge him, so let him go. That evening, police questioned Alexis Schwartzel, who had recently ended her 3-year relationship with Justin Thurber. When informed about the investigation into Jody Sanderholm's disappearance, Alexis was shocked. She revealed that Justin had once told her that he had been watching Jody since he was 13 years old, often sneaking peeks at her while she swam in her backyard pool and even peered through her bedroom window, waiting for her to change clothes. Alexis explained that she had broken up with Justin due to his abusive behavior and increasing strange tendencies. She recalled that during intimate moments, he would choke her until she lost consciousness. Moreover, he would ask her to fight him, as it was the only way he could become aroused. The police grew increasingly suspicious of Justin's involvement in Jody's disappearance, despite lacking concrete evidence. Nonetheless, Justin was arrested later that evening, on January 6th. Detective Eric Mata arrested Justin Thurber for bail violation and criminal trespassing because Justin was found on the college campus, which the detective believed he was not supposed to be on. Justin requested to speak with his lawyer when arrested. Around the same time, police officers arrived at Justin's parents' house with a search warrant. During the search, the officers took Justin's shoes, which were wet and drying on a towel. His father had helped him clean the mud from the shoes. The clothes he wore when his father picked him up were also found, but Justin had already washed them. On January 7th, rugged terrain search teams combed the Kaw Wildlife Area for Jody Sanderholm, finding shoe prints matching Justin's and smaller ones. They stopped for the night, resuming the search the next day. En route home, searchers checked Cowley County State Fishing Lake, recalling Justin was wet when picked up by his father. Near a public restroom, investigators discovered several important pieces of evidence. This included a muddy tire track, shoe prints with mud on them, and a portable toilet containing a handwritten note addressed to the parents of Jody Sanderholm. In another toilet, they found dance shoes and a flip-flop sandal that matched the footprints found at the Caw Wildlife Area. Further searches yielded a collection of personal belongings, including cut-off sweat shorts, a wallet with Jody's driver's license and social security card, a black leotard, a tigerette jacket with her first name on it, a vehicle floor mat, and a car seat cushion. Search efforts focused on Cowley County State Fishing Lake and the Caw Wildlife Area. On January 9th, specialists used sonar to locate Jody's submerged car. Tragically, her body was found later that day, hidden under debris. DNA evidence linked Justin Thurber to the car and body, but water in the car likely destroyed additional evidence. Forensic investigators found crucial evidence after many hours of work. A hair on Jody's car seat was matched to Justin Thurber through mitochondrial DNA testing. Private DNA expert Barbara Leal analyzed samples from Jody's arm and chest. It was possible that Justin was involved. Cell tower data showed Jody's and Justin's phones were in the same area simultaneously. This was corroborated by Jody's friend Lori, who saw Justin in the college parking lot that day. Security footage confirmed Lori's account, showing Justin following Jody in his Cadillac. Investigators believe that Justin followed Jody from college to her home, where he attacked her after she retrieved letters from the mailbox. A shoe print identical to Justin's sneakers was found by the mailbox, supporting this theory. Footprints matching Justin's shoes were discovered at the Caw Wildlife Area, and smaller prints matched Jody's shoes found at the lake, along with her other belongings. In the preserve, searchers found footprints of Justin and Jody side by side, indicating they walked together at one point. However, Jody's footprints stopped and Justin's continued deeper into the woods, so he carried her further on his own. His shoe prints were also found near where the body was discovered. Moreover, the three people Justin claimed to have been with on the day of Jody's disappearance denied his story, revealing that his alibi about getting stuck near Cedar Vale was a lie. The police drove Justin to Cedar Vale to verify his alibi, but he couldn't pinpoint the location where he claimed his car was stuck. Back at the police station, Justin agreed to take a polygraph test and requested that his relative, Chad Monroe, who worked for the Cowley County Sheriff's Office, be present during the questioning. The collected evidence was sufficient to indict Justin Thurber, despite his denial of guilt. The judge set his bail at $1 million. Justin's lawyers attempted to argue that he was mentally incompetent, but their efforts were unsuccessful. Given that Justin had graduated from high school and attended college, the judge deemed the defense's claim of mental retardation unproven. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy testified in court, describing the brutal nature of Jody's last hours. Her body and face were covered in bruises and abrasions, with clear signs of strangulation on her neck, which was ultimately determined to be the cause of her death. Here's what the medical examiner found during the autopsy. The crime was driven by sexual desire and involved an object, a stick. To give you an idea of what happened at the wildlife area without going into detail, it's worth noting that not all violent criminals are as brutal as Justin. At Justin's trial, 7 women, including his ex-girlfriend, testified that they had been stalked by him. One of these women was a co-worker who was so afraid of Justin that she had to have a police officer escort her to her car after work because she had seen him waiting for her earlier. He had left a disturbing gift on her car, a rose, and a note saying he was interested in her. Multiple witnesses reported seeing Jody Sanderholm's car on January 5, 2007. Carrie Morris, a friend of Jody's, saw Jody sitting in the passenger seat of her car as they drove past each other in Arkansas City around noon. Morris noticed that the driver was a large man. She tried to call Jody's cell phone, but there was no answer. Later that day, around 3 p.m., two other women reported seeing a car that looked similar to Jody's on a dirt road south of Arkansas City. One of the women identified the driver as Justin in court. After a trial, the jury delivered a unanimous verdict on February 17, 2009, finding Justin guilty on all counts. They recommended that he be sentenced to death. Justin's lawyer attempted to negotiate a plea deal to avoid the death penalty, but Jody's family opposed it. The judge ultimately sentenced Justin to death by lethal injection in March 2009. In 2008, Kansas expanded its stalking laws, increasing police authority and the definition of stalking behaviors. Since his sentencing, Justin Thurber has continued to appeal the court's decision. His lawyers are now arguing that he has a mental disability, which they claim is supported by evidence from 2018. However, the Kansas Supreme Court has put his death sentence on hold, citing a U.S. Supreme Court ruling that prohibits the execution of individuals with developmental disabilities, even if they are mild. Justin was found competent at his original trial. Years later, Jody's mother, Cindy Sanderholm, attended a hearing and was outraged that Justin had written letters to girls while in prison, seeing it as proof of his competency. Justin is currently appealing a death sentence, and a 2020 state law gives him the opportunity to request an attorney to assist with post-conviction DNA testing from the Cowley County District Court. This is significant because, despite it being 16 years since Jody Sanderholm's murder, the case is still not fully resolved. Additionally, the speaker believes that Jody pleaded for her life, but Justin did not spare her, denying her a second chance. Kansas reinstated the death penalty in 1994, but no one has been executed since then. In fact, the last execution in Kansas took place in 1965. Since the reinstatement, 10 people, including Justin, have been sentenced to death, but none of their sentences have been carried out. According to Adam Fan and Steele, spokesperson for the Kansas Department of Corrections, there are no plans for future executions. Jennifer Aldridge, Jody's sister, finds it surprising that Kansas reinstated the death penalty over 20 years ago without a plan for carrying out executions. She believes this issue should have been discussed when the penalty was reinstated. Even if Justin's death sentence is upheld, it is likely that it will not be carried out. Justin Thurber is currently being held at the maximum security El Dorado Correctional Facility in Butler County, Kansas. According to a 2014 report by the Kansas Legislative Post-Audit Committee, it costs almost $49,000 per year to keep an inmate in administrative segregation at El Dorado. Furthermore, it's not just the cost of housing a death row inmate, it's also 4 times more expensive to prosecute a case where the death penalty is sought by the prosecution. The Sanderholms feel that paying taxes is an additional unfair burden on top of the emotional pain they're already enduring as they wait for justice in their daughter Jody's case. Brian Sanderholm explained, "Every week, when I see the taxes deducted from my paycheck, it's a painful reminder that I'm supporting the person responsible for our suffering." His wife Cindy echoed his sentiments, saying, "He deserves the maximum punishment, which is what the law intended. We need to reform the law so it can be enforced effectively." If you were in our shoes, what would you want to happen to someone who harmed your child? Cynthia Ann Sanderholm, Jody's mother, sadly passed away on December 2, 2022, at the age of 63. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Corey Desmond. Corey Desmond was born on March 18, 1980, at Torrance Memorial Hospital, where she immediately faced a life-or-death struggle due to a hole in her diaphragm. Despite the odds against her, Corey underwent multiple surgeries and defied a 20% chance of survival, not only recovering but thriving as well. Those who knew Corey described her as a bright, self-assured young woman who wasn't afraid to speak her mind. She was energetic, affectionate, and cared deeply for many people. After graduating from North Torrance High School, Corey earned a master's degree in criminal justice from Long Beach State. However, she later changed her mind and decided to pursue a teaching career. Sadly, Corey's life was cut short, but just a week after her passing, a notice arrived in the mail confirming that she had earned her teaching credential. Corey was loved by many and had a special gift for connecting with people. Corey had formed close bonds with her co-workers at various bars and restaurants, which made her want to continue working in the industry despite her family's disapproval. On Saturday, February 14, 2009, Corey finished her shift at a bar at 9:30 p.m. and walked 2 blocks to Street Lounge, a popular bar where many of her friends worked. Surveillance cameras captured her helping out her friends at the bar until it closed around 2 a.m. After that, none of her friends saw her again. 2 days later, on Monday, February 16th, at around 2:20 p.m., the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office received a call from a driver who was about 100 miles away from the bar where Corey was last seen. The driver had stopped to remove snow chains from his tires when he noticed a strong, unpleasant odor. Initially, he thought it was from an animal that had been hit by a car, but he decided to investigate. A short distance from his car, he found a black plastic garbage bag containing a woman's body. Panicked, the driver ran into the road, flagging down cars and asking someone to call the police, as his phone was out of PIN. The victim, 28-year-old Corey Day Desmond, was identified through fingerprints and her driver's license. She had suffered a brutal attack, dying from strangulation, with multiple bruises on her face and neck, and head injuries. Despite her efforts to fight back, evident from defense wounds, she succumbed to the assault. Although the exact time of death couldn't be determined, experts estimated that Corey's body had been lying on the street for 12 to 36 hours before it was discovered. Notably, her pants were found unbuttoned and pulled down to her knees, but there was no evidence of sexual assault. Investigators concluded that the location where the body was found was not the site of the murder. The killer likely dumped Corey's body by the side of the road and hoping it would take time for it to be discovered. Before the police found her body, a rainstorm had washed away any potential evidence. Breaking the news to families of the deceased or missing is one of the toughest parts of a policeman's job. The news of Corey's body being discovered in a garbage bag was devastating for her grandmother, with whom Corey was living, and just as shocking for Mark, Corey's father. Mark was well aware of how the system worked and knew that investigations could be delayed for months due to the need for warrants for searches, interrogations, and fingerprinting. He also knew that bureaucratic red tape could slow down the process of solving a crime. Instead of waiting for the police to find Corey's killer, Mark decided to take matters into his own hands. Driven by his love for his daughter, Mark began searching for the person responsible. He discovered Corey's abandoned Jeep Wrangler in an alley near the bar where she worked. He also learned that Corey had gone missing on the night of February 15th, although no one had realized it at the time. Corey's grandmother hadn't been alarmed because Corey was an adult and could have stayed overnight at a friend's house. To piece together the events of the evening, investigators visited the bar where Corey worked as a waitress. They spoke with her co-workers, who revealed that Corey had finished her shift at 9:30 p.m. and then headed to another bar where her friends were working. This was a common routine for Corey, as she would often socialize with her friends and even lend a hand at the bar, earning extra tips in the process. Many regulars at the bar recognized Corey and thought she was a part of the staff. Security cameras confirmed this account, capturing footage of Corey assisting her friends behind the counter. However, on this evening, Corey's luck took a turn for the worse. She got into an argument with a drunk and disorderly man who was making inappropriate comments and inappropriately touching women. When a disruptive man showed up at the bar, Corey stood up for the other patrons and told him he wasn't welcome. The man became furious, but eventually agreed to leave. Corey went back to helping her friends and serving drinks as if nothing had happened. And even though she drank some alcohol that evening, it didn't seem to affect her behavior. After 2 a.m., Corey left the bar alone, planning to head home. But tragically, her body was found 100 miles away the next day. Mark helped the police by sharing any information he could find on TV and appealed to others to come forward with any crucial details. Meanwhile, the police identified the man who had gotten into a fight with Corey before her death. When questioned by investigators, the man claimed not to know Corey Desmond, but admitted to having a big fight with a woman at a bar on February 14th. He blamed his behavior on alcohol, saying it made him lose control, and confirmed that he was kicked out of the bar afterwards and went home to sleep. The man denied any involvement in the crime and agreed to take a polygraph test and let the police search his house and car. The investigators thoroughly searched the suspect's car, looking for any signs of evidence, such as bloodstains, hair, or personal belongings of Corey. Despite the car being dirty inside and out, forensic experts found nothing. They also searched his house, but found no indication of his involvement in the crime. The police then turned to a polygraph test as their last hope to catch the suspect, but he passed it easily, answering all their questions. His wife corroborated his alibi, stating that he returned home before 2 a.m. and went straight to bed. Since Corey left the bar around 2 a.m., it seemed clear that this man was not involved in her death. Consequently, the police removed him from their list of suspects, but they were left with no other leads or persons of interest in the investigation. Investigators looked into her personal life to see if she had any enemies who might have wanted to harm her. They discovered a strange detail. Corey had stopped by the bar where she worked to ask to use the restroom, but the owner refused since the bar was closed and told her to go home. This was around 2:20 a.m., but what happened after that remains unknown because Corey never got in her car and didn't go home. The investigators thought that Corey might have been abducted or attacked near her workplace, but the bar's security cameras didn't capture anything, and there were no witnesses on the street at that late hour. When Corey died, her blood alcohol level was more than 4 times the legal limit for driving, but it's unclear whether she was planning to drive or looking for another way to get home. Unfortunately, Corey didn't encounter anyone who could help her that night. A month into the investigation, the police had checked all leads and found no new suspects, reaching a dead end. However, Corey's father, Mark, was not ready to give up. He rented 3 billboards on Aria Boulevard in Redondo Beach. Information about Corey was displayed on 50 electronic billboards, which eventually led to a breakthrough in the case. In May 2009, the police received a call from a woman named Tiffany who had seen Corey's photo on one of the billboards. Tiffany's tip helped the police solve the case. She was clearly nervous and upset, speaking quietly and rambling at first. However, she eventually composed herself and explained that she thought her boyfriend, Tony Lopez Perez, might have killed Corey Desmond. She added that he had been acting strangely and that she would like to talk to them more about it in person. Tiffany arranged to meet with the detective in a park where she shared her suspicions. She told him that on Valentine's Day, she and Tony had planned a romantic dinner. She spent the evening getting ready, dropping off her kids at her parents' house, getting her hair done, and buying a new red dress, which Tony particularly liked. Tony was working that day, but was supposed to come home around 11:30 p.m. Tiffany waited up for Tony all night, but he didn't respond to her calls and messages. When he finally returned home at 4:30 a.m., he claimed to be too drunk to drive and said he had fallen asleep in his car. Tiffany found this suspicious, especially since Tony rarely cleaned his car, but afterwards, he suddenly bought cleaning products and washed the car thoroughly, refusing her help. A few days later, Tony sold his white Dodge for a low price and bought a new car without explanation. He also changed his phone number for no apparent reason. On their trip to Big Bear Lake, Tony's behavior seemed normal at first, but then he stopped the car and asked Tiffany if she thought the body of a murdered bartender had been dumped there. He seemed certain that the police had found her body in that exact location. Tony Lopez Perez and Tiffany had lived together for about 4 years and had a 6-year-old son, but they were never married. Tony was a hard-working and well-liked man with no criminal record. He came from a large family with 8 siblings, and his parents had grown up in the LA area. Tony had attended high school in Manhattan Beach. However, after Corey Desmond's death, Tiffany began to notice some suspicious behavior from Tony. He was absent on the day of Corey's death, and later he was seen cleaning his car urgently and trying to sell it quickly. He also made a strange comment about where the police found Corey's body. Additionally, he changed his phone number and displayed odd behavior. When Tiffany connected these dots, she realized that Tony might be involved in Corey's death. She was hesitant to believe it, but she agreed to cooperate with the investigators. They decided to interview Tony at his house, making it seem like a routine witness inquiry into Corey's case. Tiffany played along, not revealing to Tony that she suspected him. During the interview, Tony appeared calm and composed, answering questions without showing any nervousness. He claimed he didn't know Corey, saying he had only seen her in the newspapers. To gather enough evidence to arrest Tony Lopez Perez for Corey's murder, the police needed concrete proof. They tracked down the new owner of the Dodge that Tony had sold quickly after Corey's death was reported. The new owner confirmed that Tony had sold him the car at a suspiciously low price and allowed the police to search the vehicle for clues. Tiffany revealed that Tony had thoroughly cleaned the interior before selling it, but the police discovered something incriminating when they used luminol and an ultraviolet lamp to examine the car. This revealed why Tony had been to get rid of his car. The police arrested Tony and took him to the station, without revealing what they had discovered. Initially, Tony denied knowing Corey, but later changed his story, claiming he had seen her outside a bar and whistled at her. However, when the police showed him photos of a car he had sold, which contained crucial evidence, Tony's story changed again. This time, Tony claimed that Corey had become unconscious on the sidewalk outside the bar. He said he tried to help her, but she woke up screaming and told him to leave her alone. Tony alleged that, in fear, he covered her mouth and accidentally strangled her. Panicked that he would be blamed for Corey's death, Tony placed her body in the back seat of his car and drove home. He said he woke up in the middle of the night, checked on the body, and realized it wasn't just a nightmare. The next morning, Tony went to work with Corey's body still in the car. After his shift, he put the body in 2 garbage bags and abandoned it in a remote area. Tony claimed that he accidentally strangled Corey while drunk and scared, but the evidence suggested otherwise. Corey's injuries were severe, including head wounds, facial and neck bruises, and defensive wounds on her hands. Her pants were also found down to her knees, implying a more deliberate and violent act. Tony was arrested and charged with first-degree deprivation of life. He led the police to Corey's body the next day. The investigation produced DNA evidence, which matched Corey's blood to blood found in the car Tony sold shortly after the crime. At the 2011 trial, Coroner Jack Sheridan testified to the extent of Corey's injuries, including multiple head contusions, signs of strangulation, and blunt force trauma to her face. He also found scratches on her body, indicating that the killer had dragged her after death. Prosecutors argued that Tony had assaulted Corey, attempting to force her into sexual intimacy in the early morning of February 15, 2009. When Corey resisted, Tony strangled her. Tiffany Ware, a former girlfriend of Tony's, testified at the trial, revealing that Tony had an insatiable appetite for sex in January and February 2009. Despite their frequent daily sexual encounters, Perez remained unsatisfied. Additionally, Tiffany revealed to the court that Tony had forced himself on her without her consent on 2 separate occasions. These incidents took place about a month apart, shortly after the birth of their son. On both occasions, Tiffany was unconscious on the couch, having taken painkillers for severe back pain. Perez spoke to the court for the first time during his sentencing. He acknowledged that he had strayed from the values of love and respect he was taught, which normally made him a caring father, uncle, and family provider. He admitted that he failed to live up to these principles and fell short. Perez largely stuck to the version of events presented by his lawyer, Andrew Hanel, during the trial. According to Hanel, Perez found the victim, Corey, unconscious on the sidewalk and tried to calm her down, but didn't intend to harm her. Perez expressed regret, saying that he should have taken a moment to think before acting. Instead, he let fear take over and acted carelessly. Corey's father, Mark Desmond, mourned the loss of his 28-year-old daughter, who had a promising future ahead of her. He condemned Perez, saying that he not only took Corey's life, but also crushed the hopes and dreams of his own children. Mark Desmond described Perez as embodying the characteristics that women often fear in society. Before being sentenced, Perez asked God in court to show him mercy and apologized to both the Desmond family and his own family for causing them harm. He acknowledged that his actions would have a lasting impact on the Desmond family's lives. Desmond's grandmother, Beverly, expressed her desire for Perez to never be released from prison and to suffer as much as her granddaughter had. In July 2011, a jury found Tony Lopez Perez guilty of first-degree deprivation of life, resulting in a life imprisonment sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Corey Desmond's family thanked Tiffany, whose information helped the police solve the case. A family friend, Leslie Schwab, attended the trial and credited Tiffany with helping the police catch Perez, saying that without her, they might not have identified him as the perpetrator. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Mindy Morgenstern. Mindy Morgenstern was born on April 29, 1984, in Bogota, Colombia. She was adopted by Eunice and Larry Morgenstern, farmers from New Salem, North Dakota, USA, who already had a biological daughter named Rebecca. They had previously adopted a boy named Michael, and then, 10 years later, they adopted April, also from Colombia. When they discovered April had a younger sister, Mindy, they adopted her as well, making her their fourth child and third adopted child. Growing up on the farm was ideal for Mindy. She enjoyed horseback riding, playing basketball, and helping her parents with farm work, including driving a tractor. After graduating from high school, Mindy left New Salem and moved to Valley City, where she thrived in student life. Her outgoing and cheerful personality quickly helped her make many new friends. Mindy was a dedicated student who balanced her studies with a part-time job as a waitress at a local restaurant. It seemed like she was on the verge of achieving her goals, but her life took a devastating turn. Mindy's friends and family noticed that she was unreachable on September 13, 2006, which was unusual because she was always quick to respond to calls and messages. Concerned about her whereabouts, her friends Tony and Danielle decided to visit her apartment to check on her. When they arrived, they saw her car parked in the lot, which indicated that she was likely at home. Danielle waited in the car while Tony went up to Mindy's second-floor apartment. Despite knocking on the door, there was no response. Tony entered the dark apartment, stumbled upon a disturbing sight, and turned on the light to reveal Mindy's body with neck injuries. Overcome with shock, Tony ran outside to inform Danielle, still waiting in the car. Mindy's friends entered her apartment, but they were met with a disturbing scene. Mindy's neck had knife wounds, and an empty bottle of cleaning agent lay nearby, its strong smell permeating the air. Danielle quickly called 911 to report the discovery of her friend's body. As they waited for help to arrive, a neighbor from the same floor, who had been alerted by the noise, came to investigate. He approached Mindy, checked her pulse, and sadly announced that she had passed away. Soon after, the police arrived at the apartment. Upon entering, the detectives were immediately struck by the overpowering smell of the cleaning agent. They found Mindy's body lying in the living room, with a belt wrapped around her neck and a broken knife protruding from it. The handle of the murder weapon was found next to Mindy's body. In an attempt to destroy evidence, the killer used a cleaning agent, but forensic experts still managed to find crucial evidence, including skin particles under Mindy's left-hand fingernails, indicating that she fought back against her attacker. As investigators searched for a motive, they quickly dismissed the possibility of a robbery gone wrong. Mindy's purse, phone, wallet, and cash were all still present, untouched, and her jewelry remained unaffected. It seemed that the attacker's intentions were not financially driven. The presence of a basket of clean laundry near Mindy's body suggested that she was attacked immediately after entering her apartment. Furthermore, there were no signs of forced entry on the front door, implying that the killer either knew Mindy or entered the apartment shortly after she did. The next day, the detectives informed the Morgenstern family that Mindy had passed away. The news brought grief to her parents, brother, and sisters. The family was confused, as Mindy was well liked by everyone and had no known enemies. Her friends had no history of trouble with the law. Mindy's friends, Tony and Danielle, revealed to investigators that they were not alone in the apartment. A neighbor from the same floor had entered Mindy's apartment after hearing their screams. He attempted to check Mindy's pulse, pronouncing her dead. When questioned, the neighbor explained that he had used the back of his hand to avoid leaving his fingerprints on Mindy's wrist. When questioned about the scratches, Robert Lind claimed they were work-related injuries, explaining that his job working with steel often left him with scratches. He said he had been at work from 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. the previous day. The investigators verified his alibi by contacting his employer, who confirmed Robert's schedule and explained that scratches were a common occupational hazard. Despite this, the investigators remained skeptical and asked Robert to provide a DNA sample, which he willingly supplied. To aid in their investigation, the police sent a sample to the lab to compare it with the one found under Mindy's fingernails. They also questioned all of Mindy's friends, but no leads came from these interviews. Everyone claimed that Mindy didn't have any conflicts with anyone. While waiting for DNA results, investigators questioned Mindy's neighbors, including Mo Gibbs, a corrections officer from Barnes County Jail, hoping his professional insight might reveal something others missed. Gibbs claimed to have served in the Navy from 1990 to 1999, but was discharged due to an assault conviction and prison sentence. After release, he had no further legal issues. A former college security guard, Gibbs worked the night shift before Mindy's death. Next morning, Gibbs packed boxes into the car, preparing to move with his family. He noticed a strong smell of cleaning agent, but didn't investigate, being too busy with the move. Mo Gibbs had scratches on his hands, which he attributed to carrying boxes. When questioned about visiting Mindy Morgenstern's apartment, he claimed to have been there only once to help her carry a laundry basket. Investigators requested a DNA sample from Gibbs, which he readily provided. After collecting the sample, the police released Gibbs. They then spoke with Mindy's co-workers at the restaurant where she worked, seeking information about anyone who might have known her well. They discovered that a frequent visitor, Ralph, who lived in a nearby trailer, made Mindy uneasy. The police decided to question Ralph, who denied knowing Mindy or having any conflicts with anyone at the restaurant. Ralph didn't have a solid alibi, but he did provide a DNA sample, which was sent to the lab for analysis along with the other evidence. The detectives then turned their attention to Mindy's boyfriend, Jordan Ram. Like Mindy, Jordan came from a local farming family, and they had been together for over a year. They met at church, where they were regular attendees. Jordan had a clean record and was well liked in the community. He appeared to be deeply committed to Mindy, often taking her to spend time with his family. However, Mindy's parents mentioned that Jordan would sometimes show up at their farm uninvited, asking Mindy to leave with him. This behavior hinted at jealousy, but Eunice and Larry didn't think he was capable of harming their daughter. The police asked Jordan to come in for questioning, and he readily agreed. During the interview, Jordan cooperated fully and answered questions honestly, trying to help the investigators in any way he could. Jordan claimed to have seen Mindy the day before she died, when they went shopping and visited a video rental store. The next day, Mindy called him at 10:45 a.m., which was the day she died. This was unusual because Mindy normally called Jordan around 10 times a day, but on this day, she didn't call again or respond to his attempts to reach out. Jordan told the police about his whereabouts at the time of Mindy's death, saying he was working on his family's farm. He agreed to provide a DNA sample and take a polygraph test, but his results were inconclusive due to his anxiety. The police let him go and sent his DNA sample to the lab while they checked his alibi. However, Jordan wasn't the only person in Mindy's life who raised suspicions. Kyle Kia, Mindy's ex-boyfriend, was another potential suspect. They had broken up over a year before her death, but something strange happened after their breakup. Kyle was the love of Mindy's life, and they had been together for 2.5 years. Kyle's family had loved him, and Mindy thought she would marry him one day. After their breakup, Kyle moved to a new place about an hour away from Valley City. Mindy was worried that Kyle would find someone else, which led to their breakup. According to Kyle, he ended the relationship because he needed to move on with his life. Mindy tried to win him back, but Kyle had already started seeing someone else and stopped communicating with her. About 7 months before her death, Mindy visited Kyle's house to talk, but he told her to leave. They hadn't spoken since then. When questioned by investigators, Kyle expressed regret over how he had treated Mindy. Kyle also revealed that Mindy had been in touch with his father, Rodney Kia, which was unusual. Mindy's friends said Rodney would call her several times a day, sometimes just a few times a week. Kyle thought his father was too attached to Mindy and had even asked him to stop contacting her. Rodney's wife was upset about the situation, as he was married. The police found a voicemail message from Rodney on Mindy's phone, left after her death, in which he apologized and cried. The police found the close relationship between Rodney and Mindy suspicious and brought him in for questioning. Rodney admitted his attachment to Mindy was strange, triggered when she dated Kyle and reminded him of his young wife. They started talking about Kyle, then discussed other topics, frequently texting even after his wife found out. Mindy often initiated conversations, sometimes up to 20 times a week. Rodney, who considered Mindy like a daughter, was shocked when he heard about her tragic fate. He left an emotional voicemail for the investigators, which, although sincere, didn't dispel their suspicions. In fact, it's possible that he became obsessively fixated on her. Despite his denials, Rodney provided his DNA to the police and accounted for his whereabouts on the day of Mindy's death, claiming he worked on the farm with his 2 sons from 7:30 a.m. until evening. His family corroborated his alibi, and the investigators released him. Meanwhile, the police sent his DNA sample to the lab for comparison with the skin particles found under Mindy's fingernails. Just as the investigation seemed stalled, a DNA analysis revealed a connection to a similar attack that had occurred in Fargo, 75 miles away, 2 years prior. In that case, a woman had been attacked and forced to make contact with her assailant. The DNA sample from the Fargo case matched the one found under Mindy's fingernails, suggesting that the same perpetrator was responsible for both crimes. The police investigating Mindy's case met with the Fargo victim to gather more information about her attacker. She recounted being drugged at a bar, waking up in an unfamiliar apartment, and barely escaping her attacker. She described him as a muscular African-American man, over 6 feet tall and weighing over 200 pounds. The police had previously entered the attacker's DNA into the federal database, but it had gone unmatched for 2 years. Now, with the new connection, they had a lead. After analyzing multiple DNA samples, the lab finally found a match: 34-year-old Mo Gibbs, a corrections officer at the Barnes County Jail, who had voluntarily provided his DNA sample. Detectives called Gibbs in for questioning, keeping him under surveillance in case he tried to flee. At the police station, they asked him to take a polygraph test, which he agreed to, but the results indicated he was lying. Gibbs denied any involvement in Mindy's death, remaining calm even after learning his DNA linked him to the case. However, the evidence was enough to arrest him and charge him with Mindy's murder. After Gibbs's arrest, 5 female prisoners came forward, accusing him of forcing them into intimate relations while he was on duty. As a result, he faced 6 additional charges. It was discovered that Gibbs had changed his name, previously being Glendale Morgan Jr. while serving in the Navy. He had been involved in a drive-by shooting and spent over 5 years in prison. Gibbs pleaded guilty to all charges except those related to Mindy's death. His defense claimed that his DNA was under Mindy's fingernails because she touched the same door handle as him, but the prosecution believed he entered her apartment, forced her into intimacy, and then killed her when she resisted. The judge deemed the evidence against Gibbs to be overwhelming and sentenced him to life imprisonment without parole. Gibbs also received additional sentences of 12 years for assault and 15 years for related charges. Although Mindy's mother publicly forgave Gibbs, she made it clear that she would never forget what he did to her daughter. Gibbs is currently serving his sentence at the North Dakota State Penitentiary. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Alicia Canales McGuire. Alicia was born on October 29, 1992, in Mount Vernon, Washington, to Manuel and Michelle Canales. Her passion was helping others, which led her to work as a caregiver for most of her adult life. Growing up on a farm, Alicia learned the value of hard work from a young age, starting to work at just 5 years old. She often returned to the family farm to lend a hand. Spending time with her family was crucial to Alicia, and she made it a point to regularly visit and call them, always remembering to express her love when saying goodbye. Alicia lived in Birdsview with her husband Bradle. Alicia lived in the house her sister Amanda's home, where Amanda lived with her 3 children. When Amanda had to travel to New York for work, she asked Alicia to watch her kids during her absence. Alicia was happy to help care for her nephew and nieces. One night, a nanny staying in the house with her called 911 after waking up to the sound of gunshots. When the nanny went downstairs, she found Alicia lying motionless at the front door. The police officers who arrived at the scene first secured the house to ensure the perpetrator was not still inside. They carefully checked every room, confirming that only the nanny and the children were present. Once the children were safely removed from the house, the police began searching for evidence. A car was parked in front of the house, with shell casings nearby, indicating that the shooter had stood next to the car right before the front door. Several bullets had hit the door frame, and Alicia's body was lying face down just outside the door. The police found no signs of a robbery, as the house was not in disarray, and it appeared that the perpetrator had not entered the house at all. The detectives were left wondering who would want to kill Alicia and why. When they discovered that the crime scene was her sister's house, they considered the possibility of mistaken identity. Maybe Amanda, Alicia's sister, was the intended target, but she was safely in New York at the time. The investigators turned to the nanny, who was also in the house during the shooting, for answers. After calming down, she was able to provide some information. She told them that she was upstairs when she heard the gunshots, and when she looked down, she saw Alicia lying face down on the floor, motionless. Unfortunately, she didn't see the shooter. She mentioned that Amanda, Alicia's sister, had issues with her ex-husband, Kevin Lewis. Upon reviewing reports from the local sheriff's office, the detectives discovered that this was not the first call to the address, with all previous incidents related to domestic disputes between Amanda and Kevin Lewis. The detectives focus on this particular testimony. They located Kevin Lewis's home address in another part of Everett and paid him a visit before dawn. His house was dark, and when they knocked on the door, Kevin answered. During their conversation, The officers asked if he knew where his ex-wife was, and he replied that she should be at home. Appearing disheveled as if he had just woken up, the detectives asked Kevin to account for his whereabouts the previous night. He claimed to have stayed at home and stated that his sister and mother could vouch for his alibi. Notably, he didn't ask why the detectives were visiting him. When detectives told Kevin that a shooting had occurred at the house where his children lived, he showed no emotional response, which was unusual. As a parent, he should have asked about his children's well-being, but he remained silent. However, when they informed him that Amanda was out of town on business, he expressed surprise, saying "Really?" and the conversation ended there. The detectives decided to investigate further by reviewing footage from surveillance cameras at neighboring houses. They wanted to verify Kevin's alibi that he had stayed home all night. They saw a car stopped near Kevin's driveway about 40 minutes before the attack on Alicia. A person resembling Kevin then exited the house, got into the car, and drove away a few moments later. Although the footage was not clear enough to confirm it was definitely Kevin, the detectives continued to review additional camera footage. They took a closer look at the car, but that didn't help identify it. All they could determine was that it was a light-colored vehicle. They fast-forwarded the recording and saw the car return about 20 minutes later. This time, they noticed a crucial detail. The front right rim was different from the others. While the three other rims were light in color, the front right one was dark. The car stopped near Kevin Lewis's house, and the same person who had gotten out of the car earlier got out again and went back inside. Whoever this person was, they entered the house about 20 minutes before the 911 calls about a shooting started coming in. After that, the car left and didn't come back. Since it was a 15-minute drive from Kevin's house to Amanda's house, it's possible that the car had enough time to get to Amanda's place. However, it was too early to say whether this car was involved in the shooting at all. Amanda found out about her sister's death a few hours later, when their father called her in New York to break the news. When investigators asked Amanda, a key witness, if she thought her ex-husband Kevin was responsible for Alicia's murder, she was adamant that he was the one. Although Amanda's 8-year marriage to Kevin Lewis ended, she struggled to acknowledge the toxic nature of their relationship. Despite their divorce in June 2017, Amanda lived in fear of Kevin, who had physically abused her in the past, leaving her with bruises. After their separation, Kevin continued to threaten her. In August 2017, Amanda was granted full custody of their 3 young children, and Kevin was ordered to provide $800 in monthly support instead of child support. This marked a fresh start for Amanda, who focused on rebuilding her life in Everett, Washington, and was grateful for the support of her family as a single mother. Kevin, a former military man, threatened to kill Amanda, and she took him seriously due to his training. Believing she was the target, Amanda obtained a restraining order against Kevin, but he violated it multiple times. He would often lurk around her house, peeking through the windows, which terrified not only Amanda, but also her 3 children. Despite the violations, Kevin was never charged by the police. Weeks before her sister's tragic death, Amanda was brutally beaten in her own driveway. She was getting out of her car late one night when someone launched a surprise attack. Although the assault happened quickly and she didn't see the attacker's face, Amanda was convinced that Kevin was behind it. Investigators believe 30-year-old Kevin Lewis is the prime suspect in the murder of Alicia. They think he intended to kill his ex-wife, but he was unaware that she was in New York at the time. Unbeknownst to him, Amanda had asked Alicia to babysit her children while she was away. However, there's a problem with this theory. If Kevin was the person in the footage, it would mean he was at his home during the shooting. Moreover, his sister and mother have provided him with a solid alibi. As a result, the police have continued their investigation, exploring alternative explanations for the crime. They returned to Amanda's house to re-examine the crime scene and track the path of the bullets. The investigation revealed that Alicia was shot when the door was only partially open. The shooter fired at least 7 shots from outside the house, which entered the interior. The evidence suggests that the shooter stood next to the garage and fired, then moved towards the door and fired again from inside. The medical examiner determined that Alicia died from multiple gunshot wounds to the head and torso, with 5 shots hitting her. 2 of the wounds showed signs of gunpowder residue, indicating close-range shots. While the examiner couldn't determine the exact order of the 5 shots, they believe the last 2 head wounds were likely the final 2 inflicted. Furthermore, experts concluded that the 7 shell casings found at the scene came from the same gun. Alicia's head wounds were caused by close-range bullet shots. The investigators explored the possibility of a personal motive behind her murder, but found no evidence to support this theory. The shell casings discovered at the crime scene were a rare Russian-made brand called Tul Ammo, which gave the police hope of tracing the seller and buyer. The police learned that Walmart had sold the 9mm Tul Ammo cartridges and had CCTV footage of the purchase. Upon reviewing the footage recorded 2 days before Alicia's death, they initially suspected Kevin Lewis as the buyer. However, the footage revealed a different person who paid using a credit card. The police identified this individual, but found no connection to Kevin Lewis, Alicia, or the nanny. The investigation thus required new leads and evidence. Amanda was questioned by investigators about her relationship with Kevin. She revealed that their relationship started well, but Kevin eventually became aggressive and violent, leading to their divorce, a restraining order, and Amanda gaining full custody of their children. Despite this, Amanda believed that she was the intended target of the shooting that killed Alicia, not Alicia herself. She suspected that Lewis had orchestrated the attack, but investigators knew that Kevin was at home at the time of the shooting. Upon re-examining the footage from the night of Alicia's death, investigators noticed something they had previously overlooked. The low-quality recording showed Kevin leaving his house and getting into the back seat of a car behind the driver. This raised questions, as most people would typically sit in the front passenger seat. The likely explanation was that someone else was already sitting in the front passenger seat, meaning there were probably 2 people in the car by the time it arrived at Kevin's house. This new evidence didn't directly link Kevin to Alicia's death, but it did contribute to the growing case against him for attacking his ex-wife Amanda. In November 2018, Kevin was arrested and later sentenced to 3 years in prison. Over a year had passed since Alicia's tragic death, yet her case remained a mystery. However, a breakthrough finally came in 2019 when the police station received a crucial call from a woman with vital information. The caller claimed to have met a girl named Angelica at a party in nearby Spokane, who boasted about being hired to commit a murder on York Road, the same road where Alicia was fatally shot. Although the police were initially skeptical, given the significant distance of 5 hours between Spokane and Everett. According to the caller, Angelica had proudly shared details about how she and her boyfriend were involved in the crime. Alexis Hale, alias Angelica, claimed a woman was fatally shot in the head, saying the killer was hired by the children's father and mistakenly targeted the wrong person. Police were interested in her detailed knowledge of the case. They discovered her true identity, found social media photos of her with a 9mm pistol, and videos featuring her boyfriend, Jadon Phelps. A video posted by Alexis on the night of the murder helped investigators pinpoint her location, about 10 minutes from Kevin Lewis's house. Jadon boasted about a large sum of money on social media, leading police to discover his connection to Kevin through his aunt. With this evidence, they made an arrest. The first person to be taken into custody was Alexis Hale, who protested loudly, claiming she was only 17 and couldn't be arrested. However, she knew why she was being arrested and demanded a lawyer. Police arrested Jadon Phelps, analyzing his and Hale's phone records. showing they drove from Spokane to Everett to commit the shooting. Security footage from Lewis's neighbors revealed someone in a white top leaving and returning around the time of the crime. Lewis was wearing a white top when questioned. Phelps, in custody, revealed Kevin Lewis hired him and Hale and led police through the crime scene, pointing out the door and corner. He stood where he was positioned during the crime, reenacting the events, and admitted to shooting at the door when it opened slightly, then firing 2 more shots before fleeing. Kevin Lewis was already in jail for a crime when he was arrested and charged with aggravated murder with a firearm, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation to commit murder in connection with the September 2017 death of Alicia. In July 2020, 20-year-old Phelps pleaded guilty to premeditated first-degree murder and was sentenced to 31 years in prison. His co-defendant, 18-year-old Hale, also pleaded guilty to the same charge and received a 15-year sentence. During the trial, Phelps testified that he committed the crime for financial gain and to increase his reputation on the streets. He used the money Lewis paid him to get tattoos, purchase a pair of Timberland boots, and buy a Ferragamo belt buckle. Phelps claimed that his former girlfriend had obtained the gun used in the crime from a family member, and he had given her $200. Lewis pleaded not guilty and faced trial. Prosecutors alleged he paid $2,400 to his cousin and girlfriend to kill his ex-wife, but they mistakenly targeted Alicia. Lewis directed them to the address, claiming he didn't know the target. Phelps and Hale exited their vehicle, with Phelps stopping near the garage and Hale knocking on the door. As Alicia opened it, Phelps fired multiple shots, eventually walking up to the porch, and they fled. They returned, fearing they left a glove, but saw police and drove away. Finally, Judge Thompson also ordered Lewis to no longer have any contact with his ex-wife, his children, and Phelps and Hale for the rest of his life. Records indicate that he remains incarcerated at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla County. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Matthew Patrick Matt Podolak. Matthew Patrick, also known as Matt Pat, was born on June 10, 1975, in Ohio, USA, to Patricia Romano and Leonard Pat. During his high school years, Matthew was an active member of the hockey team. After graduating, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. Following his time in the Navy, he landed a job at Phoenix Industrial Finishing, a company owned by his uncle. However, Matthew struggled to get along with his co-workers. According to his sister, Chrissy Duca, some colleagues were jealous of his uncle's influence and resented the fact that Matthew was being groomed to take over the business. As an outdoorsy person, Matthew enjoyed activities like boating, camping, and hunting in his free time. He also participated in softball and hockey games. In 2003, Matthew met his partner, Holly McFeature, and they started dating soon after. They moved in together in a Cleveland home and began building a life. Friends described Matthew as a happy and settled person who was eager to start a family. Within a year, they welcomed their daughter, Samantha, and 2 years later, their son, Josh. Additionally, Holly's child from a previous relationship also became part of their family. Matthew fell deeply in love with Holly, and his mother, Patricia, said he loved her with all his heart. In a short time, Matthew went from being a bachelor to a father of 3. The early years of their relationship were filled with love, passion, and mutual understanding. However, by 2005, their relationship had become argumentative and strained. Whenever Matthew and Holly had a fight, he would leave home and spend the night at a friend's house. This happened multiple times, and his friends advised him to end the relationship, suspecting that Holly was selfish and had a bad influence on him. Despite their warnings, Matthew never listened and always went back to Holly. Matthew had a life insurance policy that listed Holly as the beneficiary, but his friends cautioned him to remove her from the list. Again, Matthew ignored their advice. Russell Henry, Matthew's best friend, recalled a tumultuous period in Matthew's life. During this time, Matthew's mood would swing wildly, veering from extreme happiness to anger, crying, and fear. Russell understood that Matthew was struggling with depression. Despite being initially thrilled about the prospect of raising his 3 children, Matthew's outlook was overshadowed by the volatile situation at home. Russell urged Matthew to take precautions and remove guns from the house. Later, in 2006, after the hockey season ended, Matthew began gambling online and lost a significant amount of money. His family and friends grew concerned about his well-being and noticed his depression. At their suggestion, Matthew sought medical attention and was prescribed antidepressants. However, by the spring of 2006, Matthew's health began to decline rapidly, prompting Russell to express grave concern about his physical well-being by Memorial Day weekend. Russell had asked Matthew to help him move a motor from one boat to another. However, Matthew, who was once very strong, had since gained weight and was struggling with the task. He was sweating heavily, complaining of back pain, and claimed to have lost his strength. Concerned, Russell advised Matthew to see a doctor and recommended Dr. Thomas Mandat. Matthew scheduled an appointment with Dr. Mandat for July 26, 2006. On the day of the appointment, Matthew phoned Russell to ask for directions to Dr. Mandat's office. During their conversation, Russell overheard Holly yelling at Matthew in the background, telling him he was too stupid to remember where the doctor's office was. The doctor's appointment revealed that Matthew's primary complaint was back pain. After examining him, Dr. Mandat diagnosed Matthew with kidney stones and prescribed medication to help him pass the stones and manage the associated pain. A few days later, on July 30th, Matthew called his father to share that he had bought a fishing rod for his daughter and invited him and Russell to go fishing together soon. Matthew's father said his son was looking forward to a meeting, but later that evening, Matthew attended a party with Russell Henry, who testified that Matthew was in bad physical shape. He had gained weight, was sweating heavily, and had trouble walking due to extreme back pain. After the party, Holly contacted Matthew's father, telling him she had called 911 because something was wrong with his son. The father briefly spoke to Matthew over the phone and found him confused and upset. An ambulance took Matthew to Parma General Hospital, where doctors suspected organ failure. Tests revealed that Matthew's kidneys had failed, and he had metabolic acidosis, a condition in which the blood becomes too acidic. Dr. Mandat, part of the emergency medical team, suspected that Matthew might have ingested a toxic substance like methanol or antifreeze. Holly denied that Matthew had swallowed anything harmful. Tragically, Matthew died the next day, July 31, 2006, due to kidney failure. Dr. Mandat explained that metabolic acidosis is usually caused by respiratory problems, but not in this case. He added that ethylene glycol, a toxic substance found in antifreeze, can also cause metabolic acidosis. Matthew's family and friends were devastated by his death, but Holly showed no emotional response. In fact, her friend Rebecca Vega was surprised by Holly's lack of emotions when they made funeral arrangements together. At the wake, Matthew's father had to ask Holly to enter the room where the casket was, and she seemed unbothered. Russell Henry described her as acting like nothing had happened, almost as if she was at a party. What's more, Holly's actions soon after Matthew's death raised suspicions. The day after his death, she used his bank card to withdraw money from an ATM and wrote checks in his name, emptying his bank account. Her mom reported this activity to the police, leading to Holly's arrest and charges of forgery. Holly agreed to repay the money and was placed on probation for a year. Her family claimed she was trying to get money to care for their children, but it's worth noting that Holly was also a beneficiary of Matthew's life insurance policy, although it was a small amount of $10,000. 2 weeks after Matthew's death, Rebecca Vega visited Holly and was concerned to see cleaning solvents lying around the kitchen, given the young age of the children in the home. Holly was questioned about Matthew's death. She mentioned that one of the items found was antifreeze, which Matthew used to winterize his boat. However, Russell Henry, Matthew's best friend, testified that Matthew hadn't had a working boat since 2004 or 2005 when the engine failed. Michael J.B, a Cleveland police officer, had been friends with Holly since 2002. He would often visit her home, where she would babysit his children, and they would chat over coffee. To avoid interrupting her or any other man, he would call ahead. One day, when he called, Holly told him he didn't need to worry about calling ahead anymore because Matthew had passed away the previous week. Holly discussed Matthew's death in a surprisingly casual tone, mentioning that he had kidney problems and pain from playing hockey. Her casual demeanor came across as insensitive and heartless, Michael recalled. After Matthew's death, Holly removed all of his belongings from the house. She gave his computer to a friend to delete certain content, and then cut up his clothes to make a quilt, leaving his father and brother with no mementos of him. 6 weeks after Matthew's death, Holly began a romantic relationship with Charles Lipham, a police officer from Cleveland. Initially, she told Charles that her ex-boyfriend Matthew had died from kidney failure. However, she later changed her story. When the autopsy results were released in January 2007, they revealed that Matthew's body contained a large amount of ethylene glycol, a key ingredient in antifreeze. After learning this, Holly speculated to Charles that Matthew might have intentionally taken the substance to end his own life. The autopsy report revealed that Matthew died from chronic ethylene glycol intoxication, but the coroner was unable to determine whether his death was intentional or accidental. Holly gave conflicting accounts of Matthew's death to different people, claiming she didn't know what antifreeze was and telling one friend that Matthew died in an industrial accident. She also suggested that a colleague might have poisoned him out of envy. However, Matthew's family suspected that the killer might be someone close to home, citing Holly's apparent lack of emotion at the funeral, despite claiming to have cried in the car beforehand. During their investigation, detectives found 2 bottles of antifreeze in the garage of Holly's home, which was documented in the police report. Holly later started dating Jameson Kennedy, a man with a criminal history and substance abuse issues, but she kept the details of Matthew's death secret from him. One night in September 2008, Holly became emotional while drinking with Jameson and began talking about Matthew, revealing previously undisclosed information. Holly broke down in tears and expressed her desire to escape her problems and leave Cleveland. She revealed her regret over a past event. When Jameson asked what was bothering her, Holly made a shocking confession. She had spiked Matthew's drinks, which eventually led to his death over time. However, Jameson wasn't convinced of her sincerity. He sought the counsel of his lawyer friend, Santiago Feliciano, and shared Holly's admission with him. Santiago advised Jameson to report the information to the authorities if he believed it to be true. Jameson then contacted Holly to discuss her confession, unaware to her that their conversation was being recorded. He hoped she would reiterate her claim about causing Matthew's death, but instead, Holly vehemently denied ever harming him. Holly denied putting anything in Matthew's drink, saying she never mentioned such a thing to Jameson. However, their relationship began to deteriorate as Jameson suspected she had cheated on him. On November 8, 2008, Jameson went to Holly's house to confront her. Feeling scared, Holly called the police. When they arrived, Jameson attacked them and was arrested for assault. He was later found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison. After his arrest, Jameson told the police that Holly had confessed to him about her involvement in Matthew's death. This new information led the police to reopen the case, which had stalled since the 2007 autopsy report. The investigation was reinvigorated as more evidence pointed to Holly's involvement in Matthew's death. Dr. Galita conducted the autopsy on Matthew Pat's body. 6 months after the autopsy, Dr. Galita issued a report detailing his findings, which was co-signed by then County Coroner Dr. Elizabeth Balge. The report concluded that Matthew died from chronic ethylene glycol intoxication, but the manner of death remained unknown. Dr. Galita explained that the ingested ethylene glycol entered Matthew's bloodstream and then his liver, where it was rapidly broken down by alcohol dehydrogenase. This process transformed the ethylene glycol into oxalate, which then combined with calcium to form calcium oxalate crystals. Notably, Matthew's kidneys contained an extremely large amount of these crystals. Dr. Galita's testimony revealed that Matthew's flank pain, which started on May 20, 2006, was caused by kidney crystals. During the examination, Dr. Galita found not only kidney damage, but also signs of the kidneys trying to heal. Further examination showed that Matthew had crystals in his heart and brain. Dr. Galita also diagnosed severe acute myocarditis, a heart muscle inflammation that takes at least 3 weeks to develop. Dr. Galita concluded that Matthew's death was a result of prolonged ethylene glycol intoxication, which led to a series of acute events and sublethal poisonings over a period of at least 3 months. Matthew's friends confirmed that his go-to drink was raspberry iced tea, which he would bring to work in a thermos or the original container, often a half or whole gallon jug. One friend, Michael, recalled that Holly McPhee would occasionally bring lunch to Matthew, which always included a half or whole gallon container of iced tea. During their investigation, police seized 2 bottles of antifreeze, one Peak brand, one Saturn brand, from Holly's garage in August 2007 after she had moved out. 3 years after the initial autopsy results, the report was revised in 2010. The updated report, signed by Dr. Frank Miller, the county coroner, concluded that Matthew Pat's death was caused by chronic ethylene glycol poisoning and was a homicide. Although the cause of death remained the same, the revised report changed the manner of death from undetermined to homicide. 6 years after Matthew's death, authorities finally decided to take action, charging Holly McPhee in July 2012 with aggravated deprivation of Matthew Pat's life. In 2013, Holly pleaded not guilty and faced trial. The prosecution's case relied on circumstantial evidence and featured 15 witnesses, including Matthew's family and friends, his doctor, and police officers who investigated the case. During the trial, witnesses testified about Holly's suspicious behavior, a phone call Matthew made before visiting his doctor, and the fact that Matthew hadn't owned a working boat since 2004, eliminating any need for antifreeze. Meanwhile, Holly's lawyers argued that Matthew's family and friends had prejudged her guilt and pressured law enforcement to pursue charges against her. Holly's legal team claimed that she was not responsible for Matthew's death. They suggested that Matthew was struggling with depression due to his online gambling losses, work issues, and difficulties communicating with his young child, which led him to intentionally ingest a lethal dose of antifreeze. The defense claimed Matthew died from a single dose of antifreeze, not multiple doses over time. They presented Dr. Robert Bucks, who testified that Matthew's death was due to acute poisoning, indicating a single ingestion of ethylene glycol consistent with suicide. Dr. Bucks disagreed with Dr. Galita's myocarditis diagnosis, instead believing Matthew had a heart attack. He added that myocarditis can occur independently of ethylene glycol poisoning, and flank pain isn't a typical symptom. Dr. Bucks claimed kidney stones aren't related to ethylene glycol poisoning, but the state presented contradictory evidence. Matthew struggled with depression, but was committed to being a good father. Jamison Kennedy testified that Holly confessed to mixing something into Matthew's drinks, but Holly denied it. Kennedy's credibility was questionable, but Sergeant Quinn confirmed Kennedy's statement was made when Matthew's cause of death was unknown. The jury delivered a guilty verdict on August 28, 2013, sentencing Holly to life in prison with parole possible after 30 years. The case relied on circumstantial evidence and witness testimony. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Autumn Taggart. Autumn Taggart was a single mother living in Windsor, a city on the border between Michigan, USA, and Ontario, Canada. In 2018, Autumn and her 9-year-old son Gavin spent a Saturday with Gavin's father, Chris, from whom Autumn had amicably separated. They all went grocery shopping together, and later Chris dropped them off at their third-floor apartment. That evening, Chris left for his own home, and Gavin spent quality time with his mother, playing video games before bed. As he drifted off to sleep, he was awoken by a strange noise. Opening his eyes, he was startled to see an unknown man standing in his room. The man instructed Gavin to close his eyes and go back to sleep before disappearing into the hallway. Gavin's room was adjacent to his mother's, which was on the right-hand side of his room. Approximately a minute after the stranger left his room, Gavin heard his mother's scream. Overcome with fear, Gavin had never felt such terror before. The screaming eventually stopped, and an eerie silence fell over the apartment. Exhausted and shaken, Gavin eventually fell back asleep. The next morning, Gavin woke up and immediately went to his mother's room. Everything in the apartment was smashed and destroyed. Gavin found his mother lying on the bed. At first, he thought she was asleep, but when he saw the blood on her nose, he realized she was dead. This discovery shocked him. Gavin couldn't contain his emotions. He broke down in tears and decided to seek help. He entered his mother's room, took her phone, and messaged his father, Chris, via the Messenger app. Gavin sent a message saying that Autumn wouldn't wake up. Chris and his girlfriend immediately drove to Autumn and Gavin's home. Upon arrival, Chris got out of the car and saw his son standing behind a glass door on the third floor. Since Chris didn't have an electronic key to enter the building, Gavin went downstairs to let him in. Chris asked Gavin to stay with his girlfriend while he checked on Autumn. When Chris entered the apartment and then the bedroom, he was met with a devastating sight. Autumn was lying pale and still. Autumn's body showed signs of severe trauma, with bruises on her face and body and a bloody nose. He immediately called 911, and police and paramedics arrived at the scene. Unfortunately, the paramedics were unable to save her, and she was pronounced dead. The police investigation began, and experts searched the apartment for evidence. A child specialist interviewed Gavin, who reported that a man had told him to go to sleep the night before. Gavin said he heard his mother screaming, but the screams stopped after a while. He described the man he saw in his room as a white male of average height with messy hair, who appeared disheveled, as if he had just gotten out of bed. Gavin estimated the man was slender, but not extremely thin. The autopsy revealed that Autumn's death was caused by strangulation, and forensic experts found evidence that she had been physically assaulted before her death. Additionally, the examination showed injuries in her genital area and the presence of male DNA on her body. Initially, the police considered the possibility that the killer was one of the building's tenants. However, Gavin reported that the man he saw on the night of the crime was not a familiar face. Furthermore, the investigation showed that the perpetrator not only needed an electronic key to enter the building, but also to enter Autumn's apartment. Yet, there were no signs of forced entry on the door to her apartment. The police initially considered two possibilities: that Autumn had let the perpetrator in herself, or that she had left the door unlocked. However, they soon discovered evidence that suggested the perpetrator had actually climbed to the third floor. The perpetrator first accessed the second-floor balcony and then climbed up to the third floor, where the door was open, allowing them to enter the apartment without difficulty. On the night of the crime, a witness reported seeing a new black SUV, possibly a Honda Pilot, in the parking lot next to the building. The SUV was there until around 6 a.m. Detectives suspected that the owner of the SUV might be connected to the victim's death. They believed that the perpetrator may have used the SUV as a stepping stone to climb into the building, and then used the decorative protrusions on the building's corners as a makeshift ladder to climb from the second floor to the third floor. The crime occurred at night, which made it easier for investigators to analyze mobile phone activity in the area where Autumn lived. One of the active phone numbers belonged to Autumn's neighbor, Michelle, who lived in the same building. During the initial police interview, Michelle claimed she didn't know anything about the crime. However, phone records showed that she had been on the move around the city, making calls from different locations, and had turned off her phone around the time of the murder. Although the exact location of Michelle's phone couldn't be pinpointed due to some margin of error, it was clear that she was either in or near her apartment at the time of the crime. The detectives suspected that Michelle was hiding something and decided to question her again. During the second interview, Michelle continued to deny any knowledge of the crime. However, the police warned her that withholding information could make her an accomplice to the crime. Faced with this possibility, Michelle began to open up. She revealed that a man named Jay had contacted her boyfriend and her around 2 a.m. on the night of the crime. Jay wanted to purchase an illicit substance and also hire an escort. To begin, Jay, Michelle, and her boyfriend went to an ATM where Jay withdrew cash. Michelle and her boyfriend then provided Jay with a portion of the substance, which Michelle admitted they were selling themselves. Later, Jay asked to buy more of the substance. Michelle instructed Jay to drive to the parking lot near her building, where she and her boyfriend planned to rob him. Upon arrival, the three of them used the substance together. Afterwards, Michelle and her boyfriend decided to flee. Before escaping, Michelle hid a bag of the banned substance in her genital area. This detail will become important later. Michelle reported that she and her boyfriend fled the scene, taking both the banned substance and a portion of Jay's money with them. They ran to the building's entrance and then proceeded to her apartment, where they locked themselves in, remained quiet, and kept the lights off. Jay was unable to enter the building because he didn't have an electronic key. From Michelle's apartment window, they observed shoe marks on the roof of Jay's car. The man left the scene around 6 a.m. Investigators believe that Jay attempted to enter the building to find the individuals who had stolen from him. However, since Jay didn't know Michelle's address, it's likely that he mistakenly entered Autumn's apartment instead. The police now had the suspect's phone number and photo, which were obtained from security cameras at the bank where he withdrew cash to purchase the banned substance, as well as from an ATM camera. After investigating the phone number, authorities discovered that the individual's name was not Jay, but rather Jitesh Bogle, a 27-year-old Canadian citizen who worked as a car development engineer in Warren, Michigan. He owned a black Honda Pilot SUV and frequently visited Canada, crossing the border via bridge or tunnel to get to Windsor. Authorities tracked his movements and found that he had left Canada on the morning of June 10th, the day Autumn died, and had not returned to the country since. When the police released information about the black SUV seen at the victim's house, Jitesh sold his car, which raised suspicions. The Canadian police contacted their American counterparts and learned that Jitesh was planning to move from Michigan to Washington State, where his parents lived in Kent. This decision to give up his job and move back to his parents' house, get rid of his car, and stop visiting Canada was highly suspicious. However, the police needed concrete evidence to arrest and extradite him to Canada. The Windsor police requested assistance from the U.S. National Security Agency to aid in the investigation and track the suspect's movements. To confirm that the male DNA found on Autumn's body belonged to Jitesh, they needed to obtain a sample of his DNA for comparison. U.S. agents monitored Jitesh's activities, aware that he was planning to move to Washington State and potentially flee to a third country. Jitesh attempted to alter his appearance by shaving off his beard and wearing blue contact lenses. But Jitesh was not cautious enough. During a visit to a bar in Warren, he left behind a glass after finishing his drink. Agents seized the glass, which provided them with a DNA sample. Although the comparison process took time, the result was not unexpected. The DNA sample from the glass matched the male DNA found on Autumn's body, confirming that it belonged to Jitesh Bogle. On August 17, 2018, more than 2 months after Autumn's death, Jitesh was arrested at his parents' home in Kent, Washington. The Canadian police charged him with the murder of Autumn Taggart, Due to restrictions in the country, the trial was postponed for a significant period of time and eventually began in November 2021. To maintain social distancing, the trial was held in 3 separate courtrooms. The main courtroom contained the judge, prosecutor, jury, and the defendant, along with his defense team. The 3 other courtrooms had large screens broadcasting the trial so that Autumn's relatives and others could watch. Jitesh Bogle entered a not guilty plea for the crime of taking Autumn's life, saying it was an accident. He explained that some dealers had stolen money and an illegal substance from him, running out of his car after committing the crime. This upset him, so he got out of the vehicle to try to find them. Due to the large amount of alcohol and substances he had consumed, he did not remember much of what happened that night. Jitesh said he remembered climbing onto the balcony before entering the apartment where Autumn lived. When he entered her apartment, he saw her asleep in her bed, but he mistakenly thought she was Michelle, the person who had robbed him. When Autumn woke up and started screaming, Jitesh told her to be quiet, but she didn't stop. In an attempt to quiet her, Jitesh covered her mouth, which ultimately caused her to suffocate. Jitesh said that when the screaming stopped, he realized what had happened and tried to revive Autumn by performing CPR, but unfortunately, it didn't work. Jitesh did not recall how Autumn's genital injuries occurred or how he left her apartment. His lawyers asked the prosecution to drop the first-degree murder charges, arguing that the crime was not premeditated. They believed that Jitesh was not in control of his actions due to the large amount of substances he had consumed. The fact that he placed his hand over her mouth was more consistent with an attempt to silence her than with an intent to kill. Bogle's defense team argued that he was not responsible for the death of Autumn Taggart because he was intoxicated and did not have the capacity to form intent or understand the consequences of his actions. They stated that his behavior was the result of intoxication and that he did not intentionally cause the death. The defense team questioned the reliability of the DNA evidence, suggesting that it could have been contaminated by John Lorda, a forensic expert who worked on the case. They argued that Lorda's actions, including rotating the body on the bed sheet, could have transferred DNA or fluids from the body to the sheet or vice versa, resulting in cross-contamination. Lort testified during cross-examination that he followed proper procedures to prevent cross-contamination of evidence. He changed gloves between handling each piece of evidence and taking photographs. Lort's examination of evidence in Taggart's room included a search for fluids such as urine, saliva, and semen, as these are common indicators of sexual assault in cases involving a deceased female victim. The prosecutor disagreed with the defendant's version of events. The prosecutor pointed out that the defendant had previously searched for substances in the same area of Autumn's body where Michelle had hidden them, which suggested that the defendant was aware of the substances and had intentionally committed sexual assault. The prosecutor stated that the defendant's actions were disgusting and constituted sexual assault. Jitesh Bogle disagreed with the prosecutor's assessment. When asked why he didn't call for emergency services when Autumn stopped breathing, Bogle explained that he was afraid of being arrested because he didn't think anyone would believe him. Bogle admitted that he didn't remember much of what happened in Autumn's room, but he did recall performing CPR on her after she stopped screaming. Gavin, Autumn's 13-year-old son, also took the stand during the trial. To make the experience less intimidating, he testified from a separate room in the courthouse, accompanied by a support worker. From this room, he shared his account of the events that occurred that night. On December 1, 2021, a 12-person jury delivered a guilty verdict to Jitesh Bogle for first-degree murder. The jury did not find sufficient evidence to prove that Bogle had intercourse with the victim, Autumn. Autumn's father, John Taggart, expressed relief and satisfaction with the verdict, stating that it was the right outcome for Autumn and her son, and that the family had finally received justice. On January 5, 2022, The court sentenced Jitesh Bogle to life imprisonment with a minimum of 25 years to be served before he can apply for parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Amanda Plass. Amanda Lynn Plass was born on December 11, 1990 in Choppy, Massachusetts, where she grew up with her sister Emily and brother Nicholas. Her mother, Michelle Myers, described Amanda as a free-spirited individual who often seemed out of place in the present time. In 2011, Amanda was working as a waitress at a local restaurant in Choppy and was in a relationship with a 27-year-old carpenter named Seth Green. Tragedy struck on August 26, 2011. Seth called 911 and reported that he had found Amanda lying unresponsive in the kitchen of her apartment. When police and paramedics arrived, they found that Amanda was already deceased from multiple stab wounds to her chest, throat, and abdomen. The scene was immediately cordoned off and investigations were initiated. Seth was found sitting on the porch, visibly distressed and emotional. Detectives carefully searched Amanda's apartment for evidence, but the perpetrator had managed to escape the scene. The investigation was ongoing, with the goal of identifying the person responsible for Amanda's murder and bringing them to justice. Detectives began their investigation at the crime scene, where they found a significant amount of blood splatter in the kitchen, indicating that this was where the attack occurred. The evidence suggested that a knife was the likely murder weapon, and it was taken by the perpetrator. Further analysis revealed visible shoe prints from Nike sneakers on the floor and broken window glass, bearing a palm print in one of the rooms. Given the type and number of wounds on Amanda's body, detectives suspected that the perpetrator was someone Amanda knew, and the motive was likely a personal vendetta. As a result, they brought Amanda's boyfriend, Seth Green, in for questioning at the police station. When Seth arrived at the police station, he appeared visibly shaken, overcome with emotion over the loss of his girlfriend. The investigators were interested in determining his emotional response. During the interrogation, Seth explained that he had spent the entire day at work and had planned to give Amanda a ride to her workplace, but was unable to do so due to his own work schedule. Seth had a limited relationship with Amanda, but he loved her and had no motive to harm her. As a carpenter, Seth used various tools at work, including a knife on his tool belt. However, he consistently left his tools at work after his shift, and this day was no exception. After finishing his work, Seth changed his clothes, left his tools behind, and went to meet Amanda. He understood why he was the main suspect, but he denied any involvement in her death. The police investigation confirmed Seth's alibi, and he passed a polygraph test. Additionally, the boots he was wearing when the police arrived didn't match the Nike sneakers found at the crime scene, further ruling out his involvement. Amanda's tragic death led to a complex investigation. Initially, the police explored the possibility that her ex-boyfriend was involved, but further inquiry ruled him out as a suspect. He provided a DNA sample and fingerprints, which did not match the evidence found at the crime scene. Moreover, he had a solid alibi, eliminating him from the list of potential perpetrators. The family's pain deepened when they found out that some police officers had taken photos of Amanda's body while the state police were on their way to the crime scene. These officers shared the disturbing images with other officers and civilians, breaking the family's trust with the authorities and adding to their emotional pain. The case remained stagnant for approximately 2 years until investigators decided to review the evidence again. During this review, a crucial clue was discovered on a dry erase board in Amanda's bedroom. The message, "Dennis was here 8/11, had gone unnoticed until then. Considering the date, this message became significant. It was just 15 days before Amanda's body was discovered in her apartment. The revelation sparked questions. Who was Dennis, and was he connected to Amanda's death? The police had not come across this name throughout the entire investigation. Detectives analyzed Amanda's phone records and social media posts to see if she had any connections to someone named Dennis. Amanda's ex-boyfriend reported to the police that her apartment had been broken into several times when she was not home. Amanda suspected a young man whose name started with the letter D. She knew this man and wanted to resolve the issue peacefully, so she decided to talk to him first. During their meeting, Amanda tried to discuss the break-ins, but the man denied any involvement. When Amanda mentioned that a neighbor had seen him in her apartment, she politely asked him to return her stolen belongings. However, the man left. The investigation then focused on identifying the man named Dennis, who was suspected of being involved in Amanda's death. The police found a man named Dennis Rosa Roman living 3 blocks from the scene of the crime. A background check revealed that Dennis had a history of breaking and entering. Although there was no palm print to match the one found at Amanda's home, the police still wanted to question Dennis. They located him in Westfield, Massachusetts, and invited him to the station for an informal conversation. However, Dennis declined the invitation. But in November 2013, Dennis voluntarily visited the police station. The police questioned Dennis about his relationship with Amanda, and he acknowledged knowing her from Chappie, but claimed he hadn't seen her in a couple of years, which was true since Amanda had been deceased for a couple of years. When asked if he had ever visited Amanda's apartment, Dennis denied ever being there and stated that he didn't know her well. He admitted to occasionally selling weed to Amanda, which was how they occasionally interacted. During the interrogation, Dennis agreed to provide a DNA swab and revealed the size of his shoes, which matched the one found at the crime scene. However, the police noted that Dennis's Nike Air Max shoes had a different tread pattern than the ones that left bloody tracks at the crime scene. After providing his DNA, Dennis refused to answer further questions, promising to return to the police station in a few days to continue the conversation. Initially, the police didn't have sufficient grounds to arrest Dennison, so he was released. This decision was made despite concerns that he might flee and hinder the investigation. Further investigation revealed that Amanda and Dennis had made several phone calls to each other on July 28, 2011. The phone records showed that Amanda initiated 4 calls, while Dennis initiated 5 calls. When Dennis returned to the police station a few days later, his story changed. He now claimed that he had communicated with Amanda about break-ins at her apartment when she wasn't home. Amanda didn't report the incidents because nothing of value was stolen. The investigators found this story unconvincing, particularly since they had heard about the alleged break-ins multiple times before. Their suspicions grew, and they strongly suspected that Dennis was actually the person responsible for breaking into Amanda's apartment. As Rosa Roman continued to alter his initial statement, the investigators became more confident that he was hiding something crucial to the case. The priority shifted to uncovering the truth about his involvement in Amanda's death and determining what secrets he was trying to conceal. When investigators showed Dennis a photo of a dry erase board with the message, "Dennis was here," on August 11, 2011, he initially admitted to writing it, contradicting his previous statement that he had never entered Amanda's apartment. This admission was significant, as it directly implicated him in the crime. Furthermore, DNA results confirmed that Dennis had given false testimony, as his DNA matched the DNA found under Amanda's fingernails, and his palm print was found on a glass at the crime scene. After realizing that the police had gathered sufficient evidence for his arrest, Dennis changed his story for the 3rd time. He now claimed that he had been present at the crime scene and had attempted to save Amanda from the attacker. However, he refused to name the alleged attacker, citing concerns for his and his family's safety. Instead, he provided a detailed description of the person he claimed was responsible for Amanda's death. Dennis described the alleged attacker as a tall, white, light-skinned individual with blue eyes, weighing between 170 and 200 pounds. He also claimed that the person was wearing old pants, dirty boots, and a t-shirt with the phrase, Why drink and drive when you can smoke and fly? Despite this new information, detectives did not believe Dennis's story, as all the evidence pointed to him as the sole perpetrator of the crime. As a result, Dennis was arrested and charged with Amanda's murder. The trial took place almost 3 years after Amanda's death and centered around the debate over whether Dennis was responsible for her murder. His lawyers presented the argument that although Dennis was at the crime scene, he did not commit the murder. Instead, they accused the police of botching the investigation and framing Dennis after their efforts to find the perpetrator failed. Dennis claimed that his involvement in Amanda's death was involuntary. He stated that his dealer forced him to collect a debt at her apartment. Dennis allegedly tried to help Amanda, but couldn't stop the dealer. He cited his DNA under her nails as evidence, saying she grabbed his hand during the incident. In contrast, the prosecutors had a different explanation for the events leading to Amanda's death. They believed that Dennis was breaking into Amanda's apartment while she was not home and that she had caught him. During one of these break-ins, Dennis allegedly left an inscription with his name on a board. Amanda assumed that Dennis was the trespasser who had stolen from her, and that is why she called him and asked him to return the stolen items. This explained the multiple phone calls between Amanda and Dennis on the day she died. Dennis, the killer of Amanda, mistakenly believed Amanda was already at work, re-entered her apartment, and ultimately took her life in a fit of anger during a dispute. A jury convicted Dennis of the crime after 8 days of testimony and 5 hours of deliberation. Dennis received a life sentence in prison with no possibility of parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ekaterina Bauman. Ekaterina Bulgova was born on May 13, 1989 in Leningrad, a city that would later be renamed St. Petersburg. In 2009, Ekaterina, then 20 years old, traveled to Turkey with her family for a vacation. That's where she met Walter Bauman, a German citizen who was 13 years older than her. Walter had received his education in Germany and had a good income, but his personal life was lacking. He was searching for the perfect woman, but he didn't quite fit the criteria of a perfect man. He still lived with his parents, didn't take care of his appearance, and had a sloppy style. He often met women online, and many of them were Russian. Ekaterina and Walter got married in a luxurious ceremony. After the wedding, they moved into Walter's parents' home, which proved to be a challenging experience for Ekaterina. Living with Walter's parents was not easy, and this marked the beginning of problems for Ekaterina after her move to Germany. The fairy tale romance was starting to lose its magic. Walter's mother, Ludmila, was a strong-willed woman who had achieved great success as an immigrant in Germany. However, she struggled to accept that her son Walter was now a grown man in his 30s and no longer needed her guidance. Ekaterina, Walter's wife, tried her best to please Ludmila, but Ludmila continued to interfere in their marriage and criticize Ekaterina. In 2017, Ekaterina became pregnant, and Walter decided to use some of his savings to buy a house, hoping that this new chapter would bring positive change to their relationship. Unfortunately, the move did not have the desired effect, as Ludmila continued to visit frequently and insert herself into their lives. The birth of their daughter brought even more tension to the relationship between Walter and Ekaterina. Walter became increasingly strict and controlling, speaking down to Ekaterina and restricting her freedom. He prohibited her from learning to drive a car and did not allow her to speak with their daughter in German. Ekaterina was confused and unsure of what was causing these changes in Walter's behavior. Walter and Ekaterina's relationship had become strained, and he would physically harm her, including beating her. Authorities were alerted to the domestic violence issue in late 2019, but the case was dismissed when they claimed they had reconciled. Ekaterina expressed concerns about Walter's behavior, citing his lack of interest in her, excessive work habits, and resulting burnout. Feeling constantly stressed and fearful, Ekaterina turned to a support center for domestic violence victims for the first time in fall 2020. When Ekaterina and their daughter left, Walter made an effort to reconcile with them, promising to change and acknowledging his past wrongdoing. He also told Ekaterina that he couldn't live without her and their daughter. Although Ekaterina forgave him and returned home with their daughter, their arguments persisted. When Walter recognized he had wronged Ekaterina, he would try to make amends with gifts or family trips. While this may have indicated a change in attitude towards Ekaterina, Walter's behavior towards their daughter was marked by total control. Walter was a calculated individual who dramatized situations and manipulated others to get what he wanted. He was extremely frugal and prioritized accumulating wealth. Those who knew him well described him as anxious and impatient. After Ekaterina became a mother, she made several trips to Russia with her husband Walter, who was concerned that she would return to Russia and keep him from seeing their daughter. As Ekaterina experienced more and more abuse from Walter, she began to consider divorce. Ekaterina's reason for staying with Walter was to protect her daughter, but she couldn't take her daughter back to Russia because Walter had to give his consent, which he refused to do. In August 2021, Ekaterina took her daughter to a women's crisis center, telling the administration that Walter had threatened to take her life. Social services considered placing a 5-year-old girl in an orphanage, a situation the Youth Affairs Department psychologists deemed severe. Although Katerina initially agreed to let the child enter foster care, her husband Walter and his mother objected, forcing the parents to care for their daughter temporarily. The family reunited weeks later, but Walter and Katerina started divorce proceedings and began living separately. Katerina's desire to return to Russia intensified, but Walter consented only if their daughter remained with him in Germany. At the start of 2022, Katerina traveled to St. Petersburg alone, meeting a Russian pilot from Omsk she had met online while there. After returning to Germany in mid-January 2022, Katerina continued to communicate with the pilot daily. Katerina, a 32-year-old woman, stopped contacting her family and her new lover on February 4, 2022, after returning to Germany. This was a surprise to her family, as she had been exchanging love messages with her new lover just a few weeks earlier. According to her husband Walter, Katerina left behind most of her belongings, including her phone, keys, clothes, and her 5-year-old daughter. She took only an empty suitcase and 13,000 euros from her husband's stash. This is the information Walter shared with the police on February 6, 2022, after Katerina's parents reached out to them to request a check because they couldn't reach Katerina for 2 days. Katerina's mother, Svetlana, reported that she learned about her daughter's disappearance in a strange way. She couldn't reach Katerina on the phone for a few days, and when she spoke with Walter, he claimed that he hadn't seen her since February 5th, and that she wasn't responding because she didn't have enough money on her phone balance. The police waited 4 days before searching the Walter family's house where Katerina was last seen. By then, Walter had completed his renovations, which included painting the guest room floor and replacing a couch. He had also purchased a large quantity of cleaning supplies from a local store. The police investigation at the Baumann house found that the surveillance footage had mysteriously disappeared. A detection dog was brought in to search the house and garage, but although it seemed agitated, it didn't indicate finding anything specific. Initial tests found no evidence in the house or garage, but a knife and electric shocker were seized from the car. What raised suspicions was Walter's unusual behavior. He showed no concern for his missing wife, but expressed interest in gaining sole guardianship of their 5-year-old daughter. On March 1, 2022, 25 days after her disappearance, the horrific discovery of a suitcase containing human remains that washed up along the River Weser. The person who discovered the suitcase was horrified to find that it contained the fragments of a woman's body, packed in garbage bags. Unfortunately, not all of her body parts were present in the suitcase, as some were still missing. To make matters worse, the fragments were identified as those of 32-year-old Katarina Baumann. Coincidentally, the suitcase was found near the lighthouse where Katarina had previously gotten married. During a thorough search of the Walter family home, investigators found a variety of suspicious items, including a bottle of sedatives that matched the substance found in Katarina's blood. Additional discoveries included disposable gloves, foil, adhesive tapes, garbage bags, and cleaning products, as well as canisters containing acetic acid, solvents, and bleach. Notably, the police found a pink scarf matching the one Katarina wore in her last selfie near her body. They also discovered a set of suitcase keys and other incriminating items in the garage and shed. Furthermore, the investigation revealed that most of Katarina's personal belongings were absent, with her clothes thrown away and her wedding photo hidden behind the piano. One key piece of evidence turned up at the workplace of Ludmila Baumann, Walter's mother. The white jacket Katarina wore in her last selfie was found in a trash container. Katarina's phone was last connected to the network at 7:41 p.m. Later that evening, she made a video call to her new lover from her computer at 8:25 p.m., saying she would call him again after putting her child to bed. However, she never made that call, and her phone remained silent for the rest of the evening. 2 hours after her video call, her lover sent her a goodnight message, which she never read. A forensic examination revealed that Katarina died 2 hours after dinner, based on the analysis of her stomach contents. The examination also found strong sedatives and alcohol in her blood, and her hyoid bone was broken, indicating that she was strangled. The examination further showed that her body was mutilated using very sharp tools. The next morning, Walter briefly opened his car door at 7:22 a.m., and the car was driven off at 10:20 a.m., returning at 4:49 p.m. 3 days later, Walter called Katarina's phone, likely to create the illusion that she had run away. He also sent her messages asking where she was in an attempt to maintain this illusion. Walter and his mother had a habit of chatting intensely through WhatsApp daily, but after February 4th, they suddenly stopped communicating, which was unusual for them. In the middle of February, Walter took his car to auto service and asked an employee to thoroughly clean the interior from top to bottom. This incident was later cited as evidence in a trial that began on August 26, 2022. The prosecutor argued that Walter had planned and executed the murder of his wife, Katarina, by slipping sedatives into her drink and then strangling her while she was asleep. Walter's motive was to avoid losing guardianship and potential financial losses in the event of a divorce. He had taken steps to prepare for Katarina's body disposal. Police found blood in the garage. Traces of her blood were also found on the carpet in the trunk of his car. Walter's phone and computer were seized by the police. He made several suspicious search queries, including how to avoid punishment for taking someone's life, dissolving human flesh with acid, and accessing other people's WhatsApp chats. He also searched for ways to die from sedatives and how to avoid conviction in Germany. Walter made around 500 search queries between December 2021 and February 2022, suggesting he planned the crime. On the day his wife disappeared, he searched for electric shocker twice. Forensic experts found evidence of electrocution on Katarina's body, suggesting Walter used a shocker to check if she was alive. In court, Walter wore his wedding ring and referred to himself as a widower. He remained silent, plugging his ears during testimonies, but showed emotion when his mother was called as a witness, crying and seeking her help with a prayer-like gesture. He had written to her asking for help, and she seemed willing to assist her son. Ludmila Baumann made a shocking statement, claiming she took Katarina's life, not her son. She visited her son's house at night to care for her granddaughter and found Katarina asleep on the couch. After a fight that started when Katarina hit her, Ludmila choked Katarina. She also admitted to performing certain actions with Katarina's body. It's possible Ludmila was motivated by her love for her son and took the blame for him. Despite her self-incrimination, Ludmila left the courtroom a free citizen as the jury and prosecutor's office didn't believe her statement, assuming she was trying to protect her son. Walter remained silent throughout the entire process, but during one of the final hearings, he read from his notes, which spanned 230 sheets of paper, covering his life, his experiences in Kazakhstan, and his love. His main message was that he loved Katerina and their daughter, but her emotional burnout and psychological problems led to frequent quarrels. Although his statement was extensive, he only briefly mentioned the night that changed everything. According to Walter, he was asleep when his mother took the life of his wife and dragged her into the garage. He blamed his mother for the crime, stating that she had betrayed him, used him, and sent him to prison. Addressing the judge, Walter said that his daughter had already lost her mother and should not lose her father as well. The most disturbing aspect of this story is not the gruesome details of the crime, but the fact that it all took place in front of the perpetrator's 5-year-old daughter. The Russian grandmother is currently barred from contacting her granddaughter, who has been placed with a German foster family. The daughter was present at home with her father when the crime occurred, and as a result, she has developed a psychotraumatic condition. She often mutters to herself, gesturing to her head and arms, indicating that she witnessed the traumatic event. According to her mother, Svetlana, the child is now living in a facility for traumatized children under a new name to protect her from the truth about her family. Svetlana is fighting to gain guardianship of her granddaughter, but German authorities are not allowing her to even have phone contact with the child. On May 23, 2023, the verdict was announced in the case of Walter Baumann. Walter received a life sentence, but under German law, he will be eligible for parole after serving 15 years. Ekaterina's ashes were buried in her hometown of St. Petersburg. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lori Slasinski. Lori Slasinski, a 24-year-old former Auburn University student, disappeared mysteriously on June 10, 2006, from Auburn, Alabama. Her disappearance occurred after she had confirmed plans to attend a girls' night out at her best friend and co-worker's house home. However, she never arrived. Located in eastern Alabama, Auburn is a rapidly growing city with a rich cultural mix and a strong sense of Southern hospitality. It is home to Auburn University, one of the nation's most recognized public universities. Lori was born to parents Casey and Arlene Slasinski on September 21, 1981. She had blue eyes and blonde hair, and her parents and older brother, Paul, adored her. The investigation into Lori's disappearance began with a disturbing discovery. Her dog was left unattended, the air conditioner was still on, and the telephone cord was missing from her home. The police were baffled by the lack of evidence, and Lori's family was left with unanswered questions. Had Lori left town in a hurry, or was something more sinister at play? After 16 years, the mystery of Lori's disappearance was finally solved, but the events surrounding her vanishing remain as puzzling as ever. The family originally came from New York State but later relocated to rural Alabama farm country near Auburn when Lori was 13. Growing up in a country setting with animals, Lori developed a passion for animals. According to her friends, Lori was stunning and enjoyed spending time with friends, watching movies, riding her bicycle, and playing video games. In addition to these leisure activities, she was diligent in her studies and received support from her family. After completing high school, Lori attended Auburn University, majoring in psychology with a minor in criminology. Her parents purchased a mobile home for her in a well-maintained house park popular with students, where she lived off campus with her cherished Yorkshire Terrier, Peanut. Lori maintained a close relationship with her family, and her mother would call her daily to check in. In 2005, Lori graduated with honors from Auburn University. Following graduation, she secured a job at the East Alabama Mental Health Center while still residing in the house park. She also made plans to pursue her master's degree in psychology in the near future. Lori's family was proud of her accomplishments, but they had no idea that something terrible was about to happen. On June 10, 2006, 24-year-old Lori planned a girls' night at her best friend Lindsey Braun's house. They intended to have a few drinks and watch a movie. Lori and Lindsey had met in their junior year at Auburn University and quickly became friends due to Lori's kind, charming, and outgoing personality. After graduating, they both worked at the same mental health facility, which strengthened their bond. At around 6:30 p.m. on June 10th, Lori called Lindsey to say she needed to stop at the store before heading over for their movie night. Unfortunately, Lori never arrived. Lindsey became worried when she didn't hear from Lori again that night or the next day. She called Lori multiple times and left messages on her home answering machine, but Lori never responded. When Lori didn't show up to work on Monday, June 12th, Lindsey's concerns escalated. It was highly unusual for Lori to miss work without informing anyone. After Lori failed to show up to work on Tuesday, June 13th, Lindsey and another colleague visited Lori's home to check on her. When they arrived at the house, Lindsey found the door unlocked and the air conditioning on, which was unusual. Although Lori was nowhere to be found, her dog, Peanut, was in his crate, looking well-fed and content, as if someone had been caring for him. Surprisingly, his crate was clean, despite Lori having been missing for several days. Lindsey felt a sense of unease as she realized it was unusual for Lori to leave her beloved pet alone and unattended. She recalled that Lori had placed 3 rugs on her kitchen floor because the dog refused to walk on the tile. However, when Lindsey entered Lori's home later that day, the rugs were missing, along with the outside trash can. On the same day, June 13, 2006, Lori's mother, Arlene, received a call from Lori's workplace, informing her that Lori had missed work for 2 consecutive days. Arlene immediately tried to contact Lori but was unable to reach her. Growing concerned for her daughter's well-being, Arlene left for Auburn after alerting her husband, Casey, about Lori's disappearance. Upon arriving at Lori's house, Arlene encountered a disturbing scene. The door was slightly ajar, and Lori's bed was perfectly made, but there was no sign of Lori. Her car was also missing. A closer inspection revealed that several items were gone, including the kitchen rugs, a pillow from the couch, a Galileo thermometer, a green trash can that usually held a rake and shovel, and the phone cord for the landline. Arlene's alarm grew as she realized that something was horribly wrong. She officially reported her daughter missing, holding on to the hope that Lori would eventually show up. As the initial investigation into Lori's disappearance began, police searched her house home but found no significant evidence linking to a suspect. However, they did notice signs of a struggle, scuff marks on the wall, and semen on her bedsheet. Additionally, traces of blood were discovered on the doorknob, and a coat hanger and a single golden hoop earring were also found at the scene. On June 10, 2006, police recovered surveillance footage showing Lori stopping at a Walmart in Alabama. This was the last known sighting of her, and no one had any idea what happened to her after that. Later that afternoon, Lori's mother, Arlene, received a phone call from one of Lori's friends, 25 years old Daryl Rick Ennis. Ennis claimed that he had met Lori on the day she went missing and thought she might have gone to make a drug deal. However, Arlene was skeptical of his story, despite knowing Ennis from when Lori invited him to spend Christmas with their family in 2005. Arlene couldn't believe that Lori would be involved in drug dealing and thought Ennis was lying, but she didn't know why he would make up such a story. Police received crucial information from Ennis himself. However, before they could investigate further, Lori's car was found engulfed in flames on a dead-end street near a bowling alley where Ennis used to work. This discovery, made on June 14, 2006, for days after Lori's disappearance, shifted the investigation from a missing persons case to a potential homicide. Unfortunately, the fire destroyed any potential evidence inside the car. Investigators found a hand-rolled cigarette near the vehicle and a gas can in the nearby woods, but Lori was not inside the car. Lori's family was devastated by the discovery, and they feared the worst. The only lead was the information Ennis had provided to Arlene. When questioned, Ennis repeated his story, adding more details. He claimed he and Lori grew marijuana together and speculated that she might have gone to sell her share. Ennis also suggested that Lori may have been involved with shady individuals. Police searched Lori's house thoroughly but found no evidence of her dealing drugs. During the investigation, they noticed scratches on Ennis's hands and arms, which he attributed to his dog. However, when they spoke to Lindsay, they uncovered more suspicious information. Lindsay reported that during her last phone conversation with Lori on the day she disappeared, she heard Rick Ennis speaking in the background. At the time, Lindsay didn't think much of it, as she knew Ennis was a friend of Lori's. Lindsay stated that when she asked Ennis about Lori's whereabouts via text, he replied that Lori was fine when he last saw her. Additionally, Lindsay told investigators that before Lori went missing, Lori mentioned that Ennis had written her a love letter, but Lori did not feel the same way. Lori had planned to talk to Ennis about her lack of romantic interest in him. Later, it was discovered that Ennis had told his friends about the love letter and Lori's rejection. When confronted with this new information, Ennis admitted to meeting Lori hours before her disappearance but claimed she was fine getting ready to go shopping when he left her house. However, investigators found inconsistencies in Ennis's statement, which raised suspicions. As a result, Rick Ennis became the prime suspect. The investigation led to a search of his car, where a knife, cleaning supplies, and handcuffs were found. Investigators kept collecting evidence by looking into Ennis's past, but they were about to encounter some unexpected surprises. Looking into Rick Ennis's dark past, investigators found that at the age of 12, he had murdered his mother and stepfather. The incident occurred on March 3, 1993, in North Montgomery, Alabama, where the family resided in a house. Ennis's mother, known for her kind and church-going nature, was first shot in the face and then beaten to death with a baseball bat. His stepfather, Eddie Joe Flowers, nicknamed Elvis due to his resemblance to the musician, met a similar fate. Upon returning home from work, Eddie was shot in the face with a shotgun by Rick. Following the murders, Ennis took the family car and crashed it into a fence along the highway. Alabama State Trooper John Clark encountered Ennis walking along the highway and inquired about his parents' whereabouts. Ennis confessed to killing them. A search of his backpack revealed a kitchen knife and ammunition for a 12-gauge shotgun and a .22 caliber. When questioned about his motives, the 12-year-old Ennis showed no emotion and explained that he was upset about his parents' plan to move, which would require him to change schools. Investigators believe Ennis lived with the bodies for 2 days, during which time he continued to attend school. He also confessed to planning to kill his 3 stepsisters, which shocked investigators. However, because of his age, he was tried as a minor and sentenced to 9 years in jail for the double murder. After his release, he moved to Auburn, where he met Lori Slasinski. Following Lori's disappearance, Ennis was the primary suspect, but without direct evidence for Lori's body, he couldn't be charged. Ennis left Auburn shortly after speaking with detectives and eventually settled in Huntsville, Alabama, in 2007. By then, Lori's case had gone cold. In Huntsville, Ennis moved in with Abram Sissons, telling him that he had kitchen rugs given to him by a woman from Auburn who had vanished, but didn't mention her name. Abram didn't suspect anything out of the ordinary about his conversations with Ennis until he discovered Ennis's dark past. At that point, Abram asked Ennis to leave right away. Later, Abram reported that his apartment was completely trashed when he returned. However, Police were able to recover the rugs, and one of them tested positive for Ennis's blood. Abram also mentioned that he had seen a Galileo thermometer in Ennis's room before Ennis moved in with him, the same type that was missing from Laurie's home. Unfortunately, even with this new information, the police were still unable to connect Ennis to Laurie's murder at that time. As their main suspect remained at large, the case went unsolved, leaving Laurie's distraught family waiting for answers. Years went by with no updates on the case. Then, in 2016, Mark Whitaker, a special agent with the Alabama State Bureau of Investigation, launched a cold case unit and reopened Laurie's case. Alongside his team, including his longtime partner Agent J.W. Barnes, Laurie's case was their top priority, and they began re-examining the evidence. They started sending evidence to forensic labs for testing and conducted multiple interviews. After re-examining the evidence, Ennis became the main suspect. Agent Mark suspected Ennis due to his past, but needed more evidence to prove his guilt. In a surprising turn of events, Agent Barnes discovered a crucial piece of evidence while reviewing old files. He found an unopened report from 2006 containing test results from Laurie's house. The results revealed Rick Ennis's DNA on Laurie's bed sheet and the front door. With all the evidence compiled, investigators built a strong case against Ennis, leading to an indictment in 2018. At that time, Ennis was living in Pilot, Virginia, engaged to Elena Atkinson, and working for a company that built portable living structures called yurts. On August 6, 2018, Rick Ennis was arrested by U.S. Marshals on his 38th birthday, 12 years after Laurie Slasinski's disappearance from Auburn. The arrest brought relief to Laurie's family but shocked Ennis's fiancée and co-workers. Initially charged with 2 counts of capital murder. The trial started on April 1, 2022. The prosecution presented evidence linking Ennis to the crime, including a cigarette but with his DNA found in Laurie's bed sheet. However, the defense suggested that the police might have taken the cigarette from Ennis's home and planted it at the crime scene to frame him. The defense also attempted to discredit Laurie Slasinski by implying she was involved in drug dealing, which could explain how Ennis's DNA ended up on the bed sheet. Ennis claimed he had consensual sex with Laurie before she disappeared, suggesting they were intimate despite Laurie previously rejecting his advances. Nevertheless, his account lacked credibility, especially after 2 additional witnesses came forward with crucial information. One of his former co-workers in Alabama, Jeremy Brooks, stated that Ennis called him on June 9, 2006, the day before Laurie's disappearance. Ennis asked Jeremy to bring him gas and let him keep the gas tank, but Jeremy refused. According to Jeremy, Ennis claimed he had run out of gas and needed help getting some. Later, after Laurie's burned car was found, a gas can matching the description of one missing from Ennis's workplace, a bowling alley, was discovered. Another former co-worker, Terry Booth from South Carolina, shared a disturbing experience she had with Ennis years earlier. When asked why he moved from Auburn, Ennis told her he had to dispose of a body. Although Ennis's comment was initially thought to be a joke, his arrest for Laurie's murder proved it was not. Despite denying the allegations and maintaining his innocence, Ennis was found guilty after a 2-day jury deliberation. He faced the death penalty, but prosecutors agreed to drop the death penalty after consulting with Laurie's mother, Arlene. Arlene later stated that she agreed to a life sentence without parole for Rick Ennis to avoid years of potential appeals and ensure Ennis would never be released. Ennis was sentenced to life without parole on April 14, 2022, and is currently incarcerated at the William E. Donaldson Correctional Facility in Bessemer, Alabama. The outcome was bittersweet for Arlene Slasinski. Tearfully, she acknowledged that it meant she had to accept that Laurie would never return home, a hope her heart had held on to.